no graded outcome, and you can see both schools have taken effective action to sustain the previous view of the school. Colleagues may be aware there's been a little press interest around the Ofsted consultation in the last few days, and that the Secretary of State has actually written to Sir Martin as His Majesty's Chief Inspector, inquiring as to where the feedback from that consultation is that took place around the proposed new direction for Ofsted during the autumn term. So we await feedback from that. What we are aware of is that during the first part of the autumn term, inspections in the main in schools will be paused, apart from schools who are in a category of need. So that is schools who are already judged to be requiring improvement or who are in special measures. So there will be a pause of inspections during the first part of the autumn term to enable the delivery of the training around the proposed new framework when we get to see it. And with a couple of weeks left to go of the summer term, as you can imagine, colleagues, that is a pressing desire for schools to understand what that framework is going to begin to look like. The final area in the report that I draw colleagues' attention to is the success had by the Not in Employment Education and Training Prevention Team, commonly known as the NEET team, who we worked with on a restructuring of the team last year, and have now, with the capacity and additional skill set, being able to move those not in education and employment figures, which is their tracking requirement, through into quintile 2 in 2025 from quintile 5. So that's for those who are not quite familiar with that, that's kind of moving from the bottom to almost at the top in terms of the national benchmarks. So that's really positive news from the NEET team. And then to celebrate the work that the adult education team have been doing in relation to the DFE Multiply initiative, which fell from the Shared Prosperity Fund, and they've been running that over the last 3 years, and you can see the work that they've covered in the last 3 years relating to that initiative. So I'll pause there.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I was just going to very briefly just related to the Ofsted. So is it definitely confirmed that the framework will be updated by the end of the summer? Is that the idea? Or
it would be a desire, I think, Chair. We in my last conversation with HMI about 10 days ago, she had not seen, so that's Wokingham's attached inspector, had not seen a draft report, and things were being kept reasonably tight to the development team within Ofsted. There are pilot inspections happening at the moment where they are trialling elements of what might be in the new framework. I think I shared with you previously the proposed scorecard. I think there's likely to be further definition required between 2 of the judgments, which was secure and strong, because they look like there wasn't enough definition between the 2 of them. We understand possibly that parents are in favour of the report card, but because no official response from the consultation has been released, we don't actually have any tangible evidence. We know that Ofsted will be running full pilot inspections during the autumn term, and that the training will be happening concurrently, and we can but hope that we get sight of the final inspection rubric at that point.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, sorry, don't try that yet.
I just have one question. You said that the audit is going to be paused for schools which are in, needs improvement. Do you know why? Because I think they probably need more close monitoring in terms of, why they are in that state of needs improvement.
Sure. So just to, sorry to cut across, just to clarify, Inspections are not paused for those two groups, but they are paused for all other schools. So those are the two exceptions. So requiring improvement and special measures schools will still be in the inspection window during the first part of the autumn term, but all other schools will not be. I hope that clarifies for you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we'll move on to the second part of that report, which is the Education and Send dashboard. Is Ming presenting on this, or are you going to?
Is Ming online, Gillian? I know that he was saying that he was delayed in traffic.
He just checking, it doesn't look like he
I can't
is.
see who's sitting behind colleagues. Okay.
No, he's not online.
I think there are colleagues online that can probably talk to the report, and I can also answer any questions in relation to that. And Ming hopefully will join us as we go through this item in terms of any specific questions. So colleagues will have seen the dashboard in relation to overall performance in relation to EHCPs, and also referring to children missing education and exclusions in state-funded schools. I think what is helpful to highlight is that we can see that there is an increase in the numbers of children who have been placed in borough within schools within the HCP, but also conversely you can see that there's an increase in numbers of children placed out of borough as well, which is indicating an overall increase in relation to children with EHCPs. I think members will be aware that the SEND team was entirely, almost entirely staffed with locum workers, and in the first part of this year there was in the latter part of last year and the first part of this year, significant recruitment, and by July of this year that team will be 100% permanent, and what we are anticipating as a result of that team stabilising is that performance in terms of timeliness being able to pick up from and get back to kind of where it should be in terms of you'll see from kind of the national figure that is somewhere in the middle, but we are currently sitting below that, and there is a weekly monitoring that is happening with that SEND service in terms of seeking to ensure performance increases. And I've just seen Ming appear on the screen. So Ming, I don't know, I've just covered kind of the timeliness of EHCPs. Is there anything particular that you would like to highlight from this report, taking it that members have read the report?
Yeah. Firstly, apologies. I make a long decision to go to school for a late meeting, and I try to beat the traffic. Just settle in the room to meet colleague. Internal timelessness. Now, what do we do now? Because it's a server factor, let me affect timelessness. Can be server agency that impacting on the timelessness. Local authority send service, regional psychology service, health therapy service. Just yesterday, we had first weekly working group monitoring meeting. Try to figure out anything we need to focus more, although we know that internal local authority send services, we just have a full complement of the new send service in place by the end of February. It will take a little while to bring it up to speed. And when I just check, just before this afternoon, just before this meeting, I checked that this month, May's timelessness, it already have improved to 52%, which is a big improvement from under 30% to 52%. But we want to keep that momentum. I want to improve further. So we also did some data deep dive to find out which agency actually complete 6 week. I just want to explain to member here, in terms of 20 weeks, timelessly, not just about 20 weeks. There's a phase of first phase, 6 weeks, and then 12 weeks and 20 weeks. The different agency involved in different phase. That's why we want to have deep data analysis to find out exactly whether any agency we got involved. Now for next meeting next week, I myself now get involved. I chair this monitoring meeting. We have identified participants, choosing young people, the therapy service, the commission service is another big factor that may affect our first 6 weeks completion rate. So the manager and the service director are being invited. One of them will come to next week's monitoring meeting. But I'm confident, seeing that in May already improved to over 50%. We will maintain that momentum improvement. Yeah, I don't know how much Emma already said. I may duplicate what Emma have already said. That's very much I think I would like to update member about. So there's a weekly monitoring meeting now to put in place.
Thank you. Did you want to ask something, Charles?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I was going to say if the figure's over 50%, well done, because that's a big improvement on where it's been. But my question related actually to the tribunal numbers, which we've outlined numbers going up in and out the borough of EHCPs, but number of tribunals going down. And I was just wondering what the story is behind that.
Yeah, I remember last time member asked whether we can bring tribunal case to this committee, particularly showing the number that parent actually the decision was made in favor of parent or not. Again, I work with the data team, with the SCN team. That's not exactly how the outcome is recorded. The way the outcome recorded is how many actually been resolved, how many actually being resolved through the negotiation between the local authority and parent. When I look at the latest data, the reason I want to explain that is in Wokingham, we have many cases actually resolved through the negotiation between parent and local authority to find a compromise. Sometimes it's something parent want. We kind of negotiate as local authority to see whether there's another solution, a parent agree. So majority of cases actually in working on resolve that way, which I see as a positive side. That will also help to reduce the number need to go through hearing, because we actually resolve the case before the need to go to hearing. Probably that's why you see the number have been reduced.
I think picking up on Ming's point, I think the restructure within the SEN team has actually brought in some additional roles looking at that kind of mediation and that early kind of resolution. So I think that has also contributed, because that role specifically is focusing on that area, which I think has had a positive impact as well.
Thank you. You've answered part of the second question I was going to ask. The first question was, should I take it, though, that it's good to hear that these things are being resolved by discussion rather than going to conflict, but should I take it that the number of demands is increasing in line with the HCPs, but just a greater percentage are being resolved?
Yes, I can confirm that. Yeah.
I think you may have answered it. I think my question was, we've had a lower number of plans that have actually been issued within the last 20 weeks as well. Has that affected it, or has it been the mediation that has impacted the lower number of tribunals, or is it both?
I believe it's mainly because of the effort putting mediation, putting the relational approach that help to reduce the number. That's main reasons.
One thing I was just going to ask about, some of it I think has been addressed a little bit, talking about the timeliness with those. It was mentioned in the analysis about sort of the HCP timeliness plan. Most of the things I think you've mentioned are to do with kind of improvements in staffing. Is the timeliness plan a sort of separate thing? I think it was mentioned as if it was a sort of a separate scheme, and I was just wondering sort of what that is, or whether it's related to something else.
It is about more. The team now have new capacity to have more focus on this particular area of performance. When a team was badly short of staff, they just didn't have a capacity to when there were so many competing priorities, they didn't pay enough attention to this area. Also, we did not actually find out exactly which service, apart from our own sense service, whether health service, whether other service are having a contributing factor. That now we are in the better position. We think have a more capacity, like a team manager. Some actually. She now work together with head of Cent and myself, actually now directly involved to set up this weekly monitoring. I think it's related to capacity. Instead of another strand of work out there that not functioning, is to be embedded in the team's work.
I think the aim of the changes that we were trying to make, so acting on feedback, but we conducted a thorough review of the way in which work was being progressed, the allocated, the capacity of SEN practitioners and managers to oversee, because it's not just whilst we measure timeliness, there's a really important focus on improving the quality of plans and increasing the level of specificity in relation to those plans, because that helps us, that helps schools and education settings in terms of being able to deliver, and also alongside partners. So that is yes, there's a focus on timeliness, but working across as a partnership, and that's part of our SEND strategic partnership, is looking at not just the timeliness of plans, the quality of plans, but also then what are any children are better off as a result of having those plans, and that's been a key kind of area of development with the service in terms of improving, and that's feeding into, you know, reducing the numbers of tribunals, the number of disputes, and really trying to enter into a much more constructive partnership with parents and carers in terms of being able to deliver for their children.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I was going to mention that as well, because I think it came up last time about the quality of plans as well, because I guess one of the things is yeah, the timeliness is one thing, but I think probably what we'd all think is actually a really good quality one, even if it's slightly above the threshold, is probably better than a rushed one which isn't very good within the time. Do you feel, is there evidence that the quality has been improving as a result of new staffing? Is it too early to tell with that?
There is a lot of work that is looking at the quality, so I wouldn't say that we are entirely where we want to be. There's a lot of contributors to an individual plan for a child, and so it's working with all of those partners, because it's not, I suppose it's about the HCPs, it's also about the annual review process, which is delegated to schools, and there is mixed quality. So there is a lot of work, and working with one of the roles that we appointed to is an area Senko. So an area Senko that was working to develop and link best practice with all Senkos across the borough, in terms of developing that greater level of consistency, so that there's less of a postcode lottery in terms of what school you're in, and the support that a child can access in relation to their plans. So I would say it's a work in progress, and we're still not entirely where we want to be, but there's lots of assurance activity and learning and development that's happening within the service and across the partnership in order to support that.
And I was just, is there, I mean, because we mentioned it last time about sort of data on the quality of them. Is that collected on, or is there oversight of actually what the quality of it is, and is that something which can be brought to this? Because I think we asked about it last time as well. Is that able to be included on one of those, so we can have that overview of that?
There is a subgroup of practitioners that sit underneath the SEND strategic partnership called the SEND Assurance Group, and their purpose is specifically looking at the quality, both the quantitative and the qualitative. And we can certainly bring a report back on some of the more qualitative measures in relation to EHCPs at the next Children's Overview and Scrutiny, if that would be agreeable, Chair. Yeah.
So when I saw in the report that the aspiration was 75%, I was quite surprised given where we were at for the last 6 months, but it's really encouraging to know we're already at 50%. And the 75% target is brilliant compared to the national. I'm sorry if this is a naive question, but it still means that 1 in 4 children's EHCP will take longer than 20 weeks. And if you're that family, it's quite anxiety provoking. Do we also have a worst case scenario, like it will take no more? I know there'll be exceptions, but 20 weeks is the ideal, isn't it? What's the worst case for a family?
Ming, I don't know whether you want to cover.
Yeah, there will be certain cases that go beyond. We also monitor more than 20 week, whether you take a 25 week or 27, 28 week, we monitor that. There are some cases because parents do not agree with certain process while we were working with the parent, so that process can be slower. So we do have worst cases, like it can take 30 weeks or 31, 32 weeks. I want to check latest data, there are cases that take less long. Yeah, but when I try to find out the reasons, mainly because of disagreement on the process, or disagreement with the report with about certain agencies' input, for example, health input. Parents may not totally agree with that, and then the negotiation taking place between our service, local authority service, and the parent and the health service, for example. I need to go back to the visit. They always take a longer in terms of complete the process. Yeah, to answer your question, yeah, we do have worst case like a 30 or 32 cases weeks to complete.
Just a query of the same thing. So, do you know what percentage of the cases are which are exceeding 20 weeks? And is this the time set that by 20 weeks, is that a realistic time scale? I just wanted to check with you. Means, is that something realistic? Because if it depends on how many percentage of the cases are above 20 weeks.
Yeah, a 20 week, I think the one not completed within 20 weeks is about 49%. You look at the May figure in May. Whether realistic in terms of the national average is about 50%. But there are some local authority, they achieve nearly 100%. I think of course, like chair just state that we need to make a balance to make sure that good quality EHCP be issued while the timeliness has been achieved. Also, some parents' view need to be respected. If they do not agree with certain assessment, we need to go back to revision, etc. But we have achieved 75%, nearly 80% just 1 year ago. So we believe it's achievable. But it does require great effort, great coordination. As I just explained earlier, you have 6 weeks. Some agencies need to complete in order for our local authorities team to complete within 20 weeks. So that's the very reason I set up this weekly monitoring meeting. It's not just about monitoring, it's about coordination. Yeah, to answer your question, Councillor, it's achievable, but require slightly certain being a few months, and also great effort of all agencies, not just the local authority.
This is a new committee, and I think Ming skipped over the bit that he probably assumed everybody knew, which is that the 20 weeks is not our choice of target. It's a national figure which we have to comply with, so we have to report that. We can't change it.
It's a legal requirement. It's a bit bigger than that. I just wanted to say as well, I think there was a lot of comment around that it's parents' choice often that things get delayed, but there are a variety of reasons why a plan might be delayed. It can be finding a place, getting reports in time, centre capacity, as well as parental and child preference. So that was quite focused just on that it's parental disputes, but the plans will be extended for longer periods for a variety of reasons, and I think it's really important that we reflect that.
I just want to ask, I noticed that the number of EHCP is reduced from Q1 to Q2, and it's now on the upward trend. We expect it to continue to be on the upward trend.
You're on mute, Ming.
My apology, Chair. Yeah, internal trend. Yeah, general trend, we are still increasing faster than before, but in recent months, we have brought down a little bit. Nationally, I just, yesterday, the past few days, the DLE just published national figure. I just able to pull out yesterday. Nationally, the EHCP per 100 pupil percentage now increased to 5.3%. In our neighboring authority, Southeast, has been increased to 5.5%. That's a big jump from last year's when it was just slightly above 4%. And In Wokingham, we still increase, but in the past few months been slowed down. Now it's about 4.5% comparing to national 5.3%, and our neighboring authorities 5.5%. That's the trend we have. We're increasing, but not as fast as the national magnitude our increase.
I think if you look at Q1 when it was 1308 and then it went down, I think that was the point at which we ceased some plans which should have been ceased. We had a sort of a clear out of things that had been hanging around. There were children were way past the age at which they should have had an EHCP, but nobody had actually ceased the plans, so they were still existing on the system. So that's why there was a reduction at that point. It wasn't that we suddenly had a change of circumstance or anything. It was just nobody had actually paid attention to things that should have been closed off, and they were closed off, so that it went down suddenly. But that's kind of overlaid by the general trend is still up.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on any of those? I just had, coming back to the kind of tribunal ones, I appreciate there's probably not specific data on this. I just wonder, with the tribunals and the cases which come to tribunal, are there any patterns between, I'm just thinking of the sort of socio-economic backgrounds of families and things which are more likely to take things to tribunals. I'm just aware of the knowledge which you might have to, and sort of expertise which it might take to negotiate this system, which can be quite complex. Is there any patterns with that, or is there any feeling that some people might be disenfranchised by not enough knowledge of appealing or the system if they feel things aren't working out? Is there?
Chair, I don't have that information readily available. I think we can find out the background. But from the cases that I've encountered, I know of, they are not typical family from, that's what we describe as a disadvantaged, socially disadvantaged background, or from vulnerable socioeconomic background. But we need to look at the data. This is really the impression I have. I can't give you an exact figure what percentage actually come from what kind of background. Again, that's something we can look into.
So I'm Sarah from the Parent Care Forum, for those that you don't know. I think we need to look at the demographics, and does that map across in terms of demographics for Woking, because we have a very different demographic, for example, to Reading. But we do have Send Yes services who will support families through the tribunal process, those that can't advocate for themselves. And they work very closely with those families, as we do with as a forum, and we signpost them onto the relevant services so that they can have advocacy through the process to support them. So there is a system in place, although they're very busy.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments on that? Thank you very much. So I'd like to maybe sort of just make a recommendation that I think, as we mentioned, that added into a report in future is something on some of the qualitative measures, because I think that will help give a broader picture of the kind of success of that. Because I think as the discussion is kind of looked at, I think the timeliness of the 20 weeks is an important one, but doesn't always give the full picture as to how effective that system is working. So I think that would be helpful. Right, thank you very much. I'm aware we haven't talked much about dashboard item 2. Was there anything that people wanted to raise on that, which was the children missing education and exclusions? But if not, we'll move on. Thank you. Right. So next is the item 11, which is the send sufficiency statement. And yeah, we've got Ollie. Hi, do you want to introduce this?
Hi. Thank you, Chair. So I think the first thing to note is that this is, I would hope, kind of quite a good news story, in as much as this is the first time that the local authority has had a kind of definitive plan in place to meet the growing need, the having grown and currently growing need for specialist provision within Wokingham. We started developing this strategy in summer of last year, and it's been based on engagement and consultation with Send. That's been organised in partnership with Send Voices, and we'll come on to kind of what the kind of key message we got from that under the kind of the proposals. The strategy itself was approved and adopted by the executive last month, but it's probably just worth picking out the kind of key points which are picked out within the report itself. So I guess the first key thing to note is, as kind of alluded to at the start, we have experienced, as I'm sure everyone is aware, kind of a substantial increase in pupils with the EHCPs across recent history, and that is continuing to grow. So you'll note within the sufficiency statement itself that we're currently experiencing in excess of 10% increase kind of year on year. That is expected to kind of sort of tend towards a point and hopefully plateau towards the latter end of the sufficiency statement forecast horizon. So you'll see that kind of year on year increase kind of reducing year on year, but by the same token, it's still increasing even at the latter end of the forecast horizon. So what that kind of leaves us with is a situation whereby we obviously have at the moment plans in place to expand capacity. So what the strategy does is look at the forecast need across each year, map that against the current plans that we have in place to increase capacity, and then kind of undertake a gap analysis of our current provision and proposed provision in terms of our current capital program, and relate that to the forecast need year on year, and then kind of work out what the gap is between those two. So the key table here to draw your attention to is table 2 within the report, which kind of neatly condenses all of that into one table. So you'll see within that table that we kind of currently where we are is say the 2025 figures, and where we anticipate we'll be in terms of the current and planned provision and the gap analysis there in 2030. You'll actually notice that, I mean, obviously it's different for different categories of need and age profiles, but broadly speaking, we're actually in a kind of a similar position to at the end of the forecast horizon to where we are at the start. But that, I guess, would be to ignore the point that where we are at the moment is in a position whereby we need more provision. So all of the plans that we currently have in place are basically keeping us standing still because of the growth in need that's forecast. So what we're saying here is that actually we need more provision in order to kind of bring our local system to a point of sustainability, both in terms of outcomes for families and also in terms of financial stability as well. So you'll note, if you look at table 3, there are recommendations at the end of the Send sufficiency statement in terms of how we kind of get ourselves to that point of sustainability. And this kind of brings us back onto the consultation that we undertook with the help of Send Voices, with parents. You'll note the core element of the strategy in terms of how we bridge that divide is in the primary and secondary phases, looking at delivering this via send units and resource bases at mainstream settings. And the reason for kind of choosing that as our kind of the fulcrum of our approach is due to a number of factors. So critically, from kind of national policy perspective, it's definitely the national policy direction to look at kind of inclusion in mainstream schools where that presents a suitable kind of approach for the child. In addition to which, the consultation that we undertook with Send Voices, a clear message back from that was that, you know, as a means of bridging that divide, really the parental voice was that we needed more of this type of provision, because from the one point, it kind of promotes inclusion in terms of the fact that where pupils are able to successfully undertake their education in mainstream settings, there's a clear parental preference for that, and having these children within their education settings within the heart of their own local communities, where they can walk to school and make friendships and networks within the local communities, has all of those additional benefits in terms of their transition to adulthood and their ability to kind of embed themselves within the local communities. In addition to which, it negates the need for kind of long journeys. So kind of these journeys can obviously have kind of impacts on the ability of children to kind of regulate themselves in time for the start of the school day. So it has kind of additional benefits in that respect as well. A short walk to school is obviously preferable to a 45-minute journey in a taxi, if that is an option. Obviously, it has the benefit of being kind of more cost effective from our perspective in terms of kind of the cost of provision of delivering this provision within borough relative to potentially costly out of borough placements in the independent and non-maintained sectors. In addition to which, these solutions are rapidly deployable, and there is a massive synergy between this proposed approach and falling roles in the mainstream sector as well, where we can effectively repurpose spaces which are potentially going to become vacant as a function of falling roles, and repurpose them with appropriate investment to be suitable spaces to accommodate our SEND learners. So for all of those reasons, this is the approach that we're proposing within the SEND sufficiency statement. You'll also notice alongside that we are proposing a substantial increase in our capacity at post 16, which will build upon the proposal that's currently being developed for the post 16 SEND hub at the former Wokingham Library, and is due to open in September 2026. We hope to be able to replicate similar models of that throughout Wokingham. So hopefully that's kind of provided you with a reasonable overview of kind of where we are in terms of all of this and what the SEND sufficiency statement is proposing. I guess the ask of the Open Scrutiny Committee is to kind of review kind of what we are proposing in terms of the means of meeting this growing need, and to kind of ask us any questions and to come back with any comments, or indeed to kind of I guess support the recommendations within the document. So I'll kind of close that there and open up to any questions.
Hi, I just want to say thank you. It's really comprehensive. I've got 3 questions, I'm afraid. In the early years, have you included any training around like the Dingley's Promise training that helps other providers to increase their SEND numbers within their provisions? Because that's been very effective nationally. And then I also wonder whether the data has been impacted at all around the national inclusion work that's going on, and whether or not that's going to change the figures, or you think it might change the figures. And post 16, brilliant, lovely to see it. We've been waiting a really long time, so I'm really pleased that that's there.
Okay, so to come back, I'll deal with the second question first. So yeah, the one thing I got absented to mention within my introduction was that, so the SEND sufficiency statement focuses specifically on those children that we believe would be specialist appropriate, rather than EHCPs as a total cohort, because the assumption is obviously that there's that other element of the cohort that they would be in mainstream anyway. Now the balance between those two, I guess, will inevitably be affected if there are substantial policy changes at national level. I think our approach is suitably flexible in as much as there is an emphasis on inclusion within mainstream, whether that be within a specialist setting or within mainstream itself. And I guess the added benefit of the approach that we're taking is that we haven't defined whether these provisions will be satellite sites of special schools within mainstream settings, whether they might be SEND units which have a kind of 70% expectation of being based in the unit and 30% within mainstream classes, or resource bases which have a 50-50 split. and we can kind of, I guess, adjust our approach in terms of that provision mix in relation to whatever comes out from a national level. Certainly, it may be, if it is in any direction in terms of those children who will be in just 100% in mainstream classes relative to those that will require some form of specialist provision, we can obviously make that adjustment as we kind of deploy the strategy moving forwards. But I guess my guess would be that we have pitched this at the level at which what the maximum would be that would be required, and if there are changes that actually mean that a greater number of children would be in straightforward mainstream classes, then we can always pitch it down. But it's best to pitch high and be able to just adjust down rather than the opposite direction. So hopefully that kind of answers that second question. In terms of the first question, in relation to Dingley's Promise, absolutely. I mean, that's somewhat outside of the purview of kind of what we're doing here, but absolutely. I mean, I've been involved in the discussions around Dingley's Promise, and absolutely that is part of the ongoing expectation in that respect. We will be looking to expand provision in the early years sector. So there will be more specialist provision. That's noted as one of the recommendations within the strategy, so that the actual kind of what that will look like in concrete terms is yet to be determined. But I think it's fair to say that it would be more than there'll be more provisions than are currently existing is kind of the direction that we're looking to take with that. But alongside that, absolutely, we'll be expecting any of those providers who are delivering that specialist provision early as that they would have outreach services as part of their offer in that respect, and that would be cemented by the SLAs that we develop in that respect. And I think the third question was more of a commendation of our post-16 approach, which is warmly received. So yeah, like I say, we are delivering something very concrete for 2026, and we are looking to deliver more of the same moving forward. So kind of multiplying by 3 in terms of the provision that we already have planned.
I just feel the need to say something before Graham Ebis shoots me after the meeting. Which is,
sorry, I should have mentioned that too.
There's a financial commitments are mentioned in this report. This is not a commitment to spend all that money. This is a statement of need, and we will have to fill the gap the best we can with the resources we've got. So one of the things I hope you will do is look at this and consider which you think are the highest priority things, and you can say something about that, because we need to focus our resources on the highest priority things. So what will happen with this is whatever we think we're going to provide in the future will end up as bids in the budget process. And some of them will get through and some of them probably won't, because we don't have unlimited funds, sadly. But we are interested in your views as to how that might happen, and how much we can afford really does depend on the local government settlement and our own resources. So that's my inner Graham channelled.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. A couple of questions. First of all, I noted when reading this that the Barkham Ride Send schools are priced into this in terms of capacity. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but last time I knew that it was far from certain that they would actually happen. If that's still the case, I was just going to ask, what's Plan B?
So yeah, you're absolutely right that they are kind of factored into the current and planned provision. So they are factored in that. We had no kind of indications that they will not happen, as it were. So absolutely, the plan at the moment is they will be delivered, and we have to kind of work on that basis. Obviously, there is always a chance until there is a spade in the ground. There is always a chance that these things can be pulled. I worked in building schools of the future, so I'm kind of painfully aware of that. So I guess the plan B will be we'll have to evolve the strategy. I mean, it's important to note that this is a strategy that will be updated on an annual basis. So as I think I've mentioned before, and probably in the previous update in relation to pupil forecasting as a whole, we will update this on an annual cycle, and that this strategy will be integrated within our wider school organisation plan. So there'll be one document that that has all of this in one place in terms of mainstream and specialist. And should it be the case that was those schools were to be cancelled for whatever reason, then we would look to reconfigure our strategy with additional proposals. I think it would be remiss of me to mention that we do have kind of alternatives in plan Bs of our sleeve in case that is the case, but I don't think it's probably worth going into that in detail now, because our plan is very much that those schools are delivered. We have kind of plan Bs kind of in nebulous format up our sleeve in case that doesn't get delivered, but at the same time we have to work on the basis of the information that we currently have, and the DfE have not said that these schools are cancelled. So that is what we're proceeding on the basis of at this point in time, but we'll be able to kind of rapidly adjust our strategy. I think it's fair to say, should that be should contraindications be brought forward.
Noted and fully understand your logic. I was going to ask though, it's reassuring to hear you've got a plan B, even if it's at a very top level. But is that something you'd be prepared to share with this committee at something in the future? Whether these schools happen or not is obviously a significant risk to the quality of service. It's out of your control, and this council as a whole needs to make a judgment about what to do.
I will defer to the DCS on that one as to how much she would be willing for me to share at this point in time or in future.
I think at the point that we know more, then of course, it would be for this committee to be able to scrutinise those plans. So we would be bringing that back. We've received communication from an education minister today confirming that they are aware of the need for the schools within Wokingham, and that we have evidenced that need, but no clear confirmation as yet. But we maintain and are maintaining dialogue with the DfE in terms of making clear that this is absolutely what needs to happen for us and our children. But that, as Ollie says, we're not resting on our laurels. We know that there's the need to contingency plan for all circumstances, and if at the point it becomes clear that we need to be moving in a different direction, then we will bring that back to here for scrutiny.
I'll just add a little bit to that they have, since the new government came in and before the new government came in, there have been several situations where the need for the schools has been questioned, and each time we've gone back and demonstrated that we need them, and we've got both the borough's MPs on board with pushing for them. The main problem is the delay that has already happened. So it's 2028 is the very earliest now, and it's looking a bit dubious. But they did try just before Christmas, I think, to ask us, are you sure you want these schools? Yes, we do. And we will continue to push for them. And I think we will struggle, really struggle to replace them, even if with any plan B, because we just don't have those sorts of resources. So it'll be a makeshift thing if we do have to do it.
And part of the rationale for producing this sufficiency strategy is to evidence the need for that provision within the borough alongside other provision that we are planning, and be really explicit and clear in terms of evidence-informed decision-making, knowing that this is linked to decisions about public finances and what we may and may not choose to spend money on as a council and as a local area, and so to be able to proffer the information in as comprehensive and as clear a way in terms of the different types of need and how we plan for that we felt was really, really important in terms of giving politicians the best information possible upon which to make decisions in those bidding rounds.
Yes, Emma, you know, I've been looking forward to this sufficiency statement, but I was going to ask, all the recommendation accounts for what the council intends to provide and the free schools. Is it possible to disaggregate this so that we know what the council is planning for and what the FA is planning for, so we know what is available? There could be issue of undercapacity or overcapacity. Is it possible to disaggregate this plan and say this is what the council can provide in the absence of free schools, and with the free schools, yeah, is it possible to decouple it? And then just that's the question. But the other thing I wanted to have is, maybe because of my background, I'm just looking at a lot of numbers, and I thought maybe this would have been better presented in form of graphs, so you can actually see a trend or a pattern, not just looking at numbers. And then in terms of percentages, when you do percentage, we're taking, for example, 2024 as a reference. I think for me, it makes a lot of sense to have cumulative percentage increase, so you know from year to there. So you are going from 2024 to 2030, you know by how much your capacity has increased. This 15% this year, it doesn't seem a continuous trend. You don't see a trend when the way it's been presented now. I would have thought cumulative percentage increase is a better way to present things. That's just my observation. But the main question is whether there's a way we can present this so we know what the council intends to provide in the absence of free schools. So we know what we, like a what-if scenario, basically.
Yeah.
Jonathan looks like he wants to come in now, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, do you want to come in on that?
Absolutely happy to come in on that. In terms of the trends information and the way we've presented it as annual increases, the reason for presenting it in that way is because you have to consider this document alongside the send and inclusion strategy, because so much of the work we're doing is around improving our mainstream schools' capacity to accommodate a wider range of needs and to maintain and to really minimise the need for unnecessary placement in specialist provision. So, and as we improve our investment in that area, and as we increase our investment in that area, the growth rates will diminish. Now, that's an incremental process. It'll take a number of years to really bed in that good practice. And that's, if you like, that's baked into those projections. So there's a level of prevention and increasing investment in prevention that is having an impact on our annual growth rates, which will decrease over time, and by 2029, 2030, we'd expect to see those have diminished. So I thought, rather than showing the cumulative, I mean, I think you're right, there was a valid description in terms of the cumulative growth over time, but also we wanted to be able to demonstrate how our efforts in the current with the SEND transformation work is actually having an increasing impact over time on the rates going into special school. We have, and I think if you see it in conjunction with that statement, the Standard Inclusion Plan sets out how we're achieving that, and we have fairly accurate projections in terms of how each of those interventions is expected to impact. So it's quite a refined level of calculation behind how that growth rate diminishes over time.
So just to add to that, I mean, I think so in terms of the graphs and the cumulative data, I think that they're very good suggestions. And probably, I mean, now that we've adopted this strategy, I think it's important that we get that one published. But it's worth noting that we are in the process of delivering the school organization plan, which, as I said, integrates all of this with our updated data and plans for the mainstream sector, which we hope to take to executive in the autumn term. So I'm happy to take both of those suggestions back in terms of the graphs and showing the cumulative increase, and to include that in the school organization plan, the iteration of that we'll be publishing in the autumn. So we'll absolutely kind of integrate that within that, so that those 2 points are addressed. In terms of the disaggregation of the data, it is absolutely possible. If you look at the current and future plans section within the SEND sufficiency statement itself. So trying to find the right table. So if we look at, yeah, the table, or if people have it in front of them, the table on page 11, for example, which is the primary component of all of this. You'll see the numbers there. For example, Rook's Nest start in 2028 and build up from that point forwards. So that, I guess, is the disaggregation of the supply side of it. I mean, as I've kind of been alluding to, I don't want to kind of develop two strategies in public. One that assumes that we get the schools and one that doesn't. I think we need to absolutely have as our public facing position that we are going to get these free schools, because to develop a second strategy, I guess, almost gives the DFE an out, like, oh, you have a plan that wherever you don't need these schools, or fine, run with that one. So I think absolutely our public facing strategy should be assuming that we get these two schools, but I'm happy to kind of formulate a separate table for members that looks at what the gap analysis would look like if we were not on the scenario in which we were not to get those two schools, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be, yeah. So I think if we can add that to, I think, the further documents which are produced with that, I think would be helpful. One of my questions relates to some of those send bases which are intended to be added to mainstream schools. Are there currently plans as to where those are going to be based, and how do you work on kind of I guess commissioning those? Are schools volunteering to house those, or are you approaching schools, or how is that working? And have you got those lined up already?
Right. So we are pretty much in a position whereby we have from the current and planned, we have all of our primary slots allocated. The secondary is a work in progress, and I'll come on to the reasons for that in a second. In terms of our future plan, we haven't pushed too hard on that, because for all of the reasons that Prue outlined, don't want to be kind of signing up a full cohort of schools for something we don't yet have funding for, because that could cause a whole host of problems. But I will say that we have primary schools knocking on the door to take up those slots, and again the picture is kind of not so rosy for the secondaries. We have been kind of going out and speaking to secondaries. If you want me to kind of define what the reasons for that are, it's pretty straightforward and clear. At the moment, primaries are absolutely facing the realities of falling roles in their schools, and they're looking at kind of, well, how do we repurpose these spaces to make them useful for the education system in Wokingham, and that kind of provides the moral purpose, but also kind of offset some of their financial pressures as well in that respect, and being able to kind of retrain teachers and use them in specialist settings. So they are facing this right now, and they see the clear kind of advantages to their organizations in adopting, moving with the tide of the national policy direction. The pressure is just not there at secondary, so that we're having to kind of go out and have these conversations rather than having schools come to us. The pressure will be there in 2027, 2028, and it's my job to land that with schools right now to ensure that they're thinking prospectively rather than thinking about this sort of when they're in the midst of kind of all of these issues, so that we can work collaboratively to kind of get these provisions set up, such that they're not kind of experiencing issues and then kind of coming and knocking on our doors. That conversation will be happening on Wednesday at the school place planning stakeholder group, where we'll be kind of exploring in more depth, see if I've got it right in terms of the reasons that we haven't got quite the take up at secondary as we have at primary. So to kind of get that local intelligence, establish kind of what the reasons are, and then really kind of go out and kind of push this agenda really with our secondaries, because again, like I know one way or another, if we have to wait 3 years for this to happen, then we have to wait 3 years for this to happen. But by the same token, I know that they will come knocking on our doors, because we're in exactly the same position 1.5 years ago with our primaries, and as the pressure has mounted with falling rolls, that's been the key thing that swung the tide there, and it will be the key thing that swings the tide at secondary, unless we're able to land this message sooner rather than later. But like I say, we are working on that, absolutely.
Thank you. And I just had one. With the funding for these hubs, is that contingent on DFE capital stuff, or is that coming from within local authority funding, or is it more complicated than that?
It's more complicated than that, I think it's fair to say. It depends who you ask. So we do receive two key, what I'd say, a key capital grants in relation to this area of spend from the DFE every year. And one of those is the high needs provision capital allocation, which we got allocated. We've already been allocated in excess of 9 million prior to this financial year, and we were allocated 1.8 million for this financial year. The other one is basic need funding, which is, so high needs provision capital allocation is the expansion of specialist provision specifically. Basic needs funding is the expansion of mainstream provision. But as our programme is in large part focused on mainstream provision, one could reasonably utilise that for this as well. And the allocations for that for our basic need funding over the next few years are in excess of 13 million. So in that sense, we sorry, they're in excess of 17 million, I should say. So when you combine those two things, like absolutely, there is sufficient funding. However, putting kind of Graham's hat on again, what he will say is that funding is unring fenced and is therefore, in inverted commas, the council's money, and we need to put the bids in as part of the MTFP process to bid for that capital. So yes, the capital is there, but as to whether it is allocated to this purpose is a matter for the MTFP process.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Oh yes, sorry.
Thanks. It was an observation more than a question. I think the point was well made about having children with SEND in mainstream schools for the benefits around networking and inclusion. I was chair of governors at West End for many years, and I don't think we should underestimate the impact on the mainstream children, because I think it's a two-way benefit, and the mainstream children, I think, learn to be more compassionate, more considerate young people. So I don't think we should just see it as, the SEND children benefit. I think children per se benefit from that integration and inclusion, so if that can be captured somewhere.
Absolutely. We'll aim to, again, I'll take that back as a note to include something on that within our school organisation plan update that'll come in the autumn.
Thanks. Sorry, two other reasonably quick ones. First of all, I've been on this council since 2016. This is one of the most comprehensive reports I've seen, so well done in that respect. The actual question I was going to ask is picking up on something Prue said about 10-15 minutes ago regarding the list of requirements to remove this basically shortfall, and that it would be difficult to practically achieve, and it would be reliant on bids going in and being successful. I was invited about maybe 3.5 years ago to go to Finchwood Park, the housing development, when it opened, and started talking by chance to one of the directors of Crest Nicholson there. Now they've got an obligation to the council to provide a primary school down at Arborfield Green, which we don't need in the short run. Correct me if I'm wrong. My point was, is there any I know there are other examples exactly the same across the borough, though you will obviously know the number better than I do. Is there any mileage if we cannot get capital bids to be successful for actually exploring that as a route going forwards? Because this man indicated to me he would be more than happy to build a SEND school, build a primary school, build whatever the council wanted.
Yeah, shall I answer that, Ollie? Is that in a
By all
political way,
means,
which
Boo,
say,
if you have
yeah,
plans.
and then you can give us it.
Sure.
We will consider every option, including whether we need the primary schools and whether we can convert any of those things. And then Ollie can say, we will look everywhere. I just don't want you to think that the money can be conjured up for everything in the current climate. I think that's probably the thing. We have to be realistic.
So yeah, so my understanding of the Arborfield Green situation is that question has already been posed by the planning team to the developer, and the answer was no. But I will double check that, because that is just my understanding. I haven't got that in writing. What I will say as well is the Arborfield Green doesn't come. It's kind of, we have a site, but we don't have the funding for it, so that would require an entire new build. So it's kind of quite a big kind of undertaking, even if the answer was yes. I think the other thing worth noting is that we haven't actually ruled out needing new mainstream provision there either. So I wouldn't want to, like, a takeaway from this meeting in writing to be that the council has kind of ruled out the need for mainstream provision there, and therefore is exploring specialist provision, because we still have an option for that, and we're still holding that option open with the developer. That's very much contingent upon kind of how the pupil yield works out in relation to the new neighbouring developments. So that option is still, I guess, on the table, but we'll kind of, I'll certainly go back to planning and see if what the actual options are for us in that respect in relation to that development. We, like I say, that is not the only development where we've kind of asked that question. The answer back has so far been universally no. Broadly speaking, I believe that is because when these Section 106 agreements were agreed, the developer would view that as a selling point for their development. So very easy to sell houses on the basis of here's a nice mainstream school for your kids. It's a lot harder to say here's a special school, because the cohort which that addresses is so much smaller. So from a purely commercial perspective, it's not really in developers' interests to agree to something like that. So that's my read on why the answer is being universally no so far. And the alternative is, well, we'll have our site back and we'll build more houses on it. Thank you very much. But if we have developers who are willing to engage in those conversations, like, absolutely open to having those conversations and exploring our options in that respect. So put them in contact with me.
Thank you. And your last sentence certainly made sense, because I could see that from imagining the person trying to sell the houses. The final question was regarding the table on page 34, which obviously shows still a need basically in up to 2030. It would be interesting, I'm not expecting you'll know the answer to this now, basically, but if you were able to come back to me, it would be interesting to know the financial consequences of this. I know we've got a send overspend now. You know, what does a send overspend of 276 plus 126 plus 124 plus 31 look like in comparison?
Sorry, just to clarify the table we're talking about here exactly.
Page 34, it's table 2, Wokingham 2025 to 2030, right. Specialist place gap analysis.
Yeah. So in terms of, I mean, a really kind of good kind of broad rule of thumb is, broadly speaking, each of those places it costs us £20,000 extra to not deliver within our own kind of provision within borough, as opposed to kind of delivering it in INMIS outside of borough. That's a conservative estimate, but the one that we use at the moment within our business cases, so as not to kind of over-egg the pudding. But even if you multiply those numbers by £20,000 a piece, it's a big number.
Quite a lot of this is already factored into our safety valve through our, not just to our safety, but through the safety valve calculations that we had to do. We have already factored in all the projected increases and the gaps and so on. So I can't remember the exact number, but it's a very large number, and if it came on the council's books, we'd probably fall over. So that's probably all you need to know, I think.
I'd probably draw your attention as well to the financial implications element of the report. You'll see the number in brackets there, which is 1.3 million growing to 4.9 million in year 2. That's the saving in year 1 for delivering all of this. That's the saving in year 2 for delivering all of this, and that number grows year on year because the provision's only partially full in year 1 and only partially full in year 2. These are big figures, and yeah, broadly speaking, you know, dare I say, it will substantially outweigh any capital investment that we would make in the short term, in the long term.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments on that? Thank you for that report. I think, as lots of people have noted, I think it's been really comprehensive, and I think it gives us a really good guidance as to what is going on in that section where we're looking at. I think we've sort of covered some of the sort of suggestions and things, but I'm sure we can capture some of those in the recommendations about and capture those suggestions where it's taken forward in future reports and things like that. So thank you very much for that. So we'll move on now to the next agenda item, which is item 12, which is the social care update. And Adam, hi.
Evening, Chair. Firstly, just to apologise, it appears part of the data set hasn't populated through to this report that you have before you, so we'll have to circulate that with the minutes afterwards. So I do apologise for that. That's the dashboard that people will be familiar with. So the document, I'll take it on the basis the document has been read that I've submitted, which gives an update in relation to social care. And I'll just go through some of the headlines of the information contained, and if there's any questions, we can respond to those as we progress through. So firstly, the report updates in relation to our children's homes, so that's Harbour House and Bay Cottage, and it advises that we had our first inspection undertaken by Ofsted, which was an unannounced inspection that took place on the 7th of June, and the outcome of that will be published 30 days after that inspection took place. I've laid out there the criteria that Ofsted look at when they're inspecting social care setting, a children's home, and they were quite scrutinous. It was one inspector who spends 2 days on location and meets with children, meets with staff, looks at records, and I went and had the opportunity to meet and talk to them as well. And I would say overall it was a very positive experience, and that will be published. And I've put the link on there where that report can be seen once it's available. Is there any questions in relation to that part?
No, I don't think so on that part. Thank you.
Okay, the next part of the report gives an update of the summary in relation to the self-evaluation and the annual engagement meeting. This is an annual meeting that the Directorate has with Ofsted. This involved 3 members from the Magistrate Inspector attending SHU 10, the meeting with a range of leaders and service directors and a DCS from Children's Services. The meeting is in 2 parts, looking at social care and then looking at education. It's a voluntary process. We submit a detailed report, and then on this occasion the meeting was a verbal discussion where they come with a preset range of questions, and they look and are particularly interested in updates and developments since their last inspection. Any questions in relation to engagement?
No, not on that. So.
I then provide a summary in relation to Foster Care Fortnight that concluded on the 25th of May. This is a national event organised by the Fostering Network. This year's themes was the power of relationships, and this is an opportunity for the fostering team to further promote their recruitment in terms of recruiting carers. There was a number of events held across supermarkets and other locations in terms of recruiting potential carers. There was also a fostering celebration event where our foster carers were invited, and there was an afternoon tea that was held in Bracknell. And I've put on there some information in relation to the publicity campaign that Wokingham's fostering team used, which is focused on carers' experience and how relationships are important to that role. I've also included a link to a Radio 4 programme, which was a comedy that was by a comedian who is a foster carer, and I think it's a very positive portrayal of fostering and the I would say the ups and downs of being a foster carer and the assessment process. And if you haven't, it's worth a listen to give that alternative perspective. I move on.
Sorry, I was just going to ask how we generally raise awareness beyond that fortnight, and because it's like an ongoing need, isn't it, across the year? And I went to that foster carer event and was really impressed by what I saw, but I left thinking, I don't think I've ever actually seen anything about fostering in Wokingham before this event. Now, I might not be target market, but...
So there's a range of campaigns that are undertaken across the year. These could be events in supermarkets. They could be outside other sort of areas. They go to the Fun Run, the Wokingham Fun Run. We're also part of a regional fostering recruitment hub, which incorporates 19 authorities across the South East, and that was linked to grant funding that came to set that up, and that enables us to recruit on a greater footprint or advertise or promote foster care. We've tried various different, whether that's radio, whether that's on petrol stations, on pumps. We tried various different approaches to recruitment. Often in reception, there's a banner up as well, particularly on Fostering Fortnight. So it's an ongoing activity that the fostering team does in terms of recruiting carers, and we set ourselves a target of I think it's 10 carers this year to recruit, and we achieved that last year.
Thank you. Yeah, do you want to come in, Emma? Yeah.
Just nationally, I think it's recognised that the greatest recruiter of foster carers are other foster carers. So hearing foster carers talk about, kind of their experiences, how rewarding looking after children, young people is, and those connections. And one of the things that we have in place, and we've just implemented our second programme, is the Mockingbird approach, which is a constellation of foster carers supporting other foster carers, which has been kind of nationally recognised in terms of being able to support and sustain carers, because it's not just the recruitment, it's also the retention of good foster carers as well. But I think nationally, foster carers are ageing, and there's a need to recruit kind of from different communities, from different family structures. So that is part of that drive. And as Adam said, we've been fairly successful this last year in terms of that recruitment, but there's a real need to just continue, because there are unfortunately more foster carers leaving the profession of foster care than joining, and so this is a part of a national drive as well from government.
That's quite interesting, because the other thing I hadn't appreciated, and I can't remember who I spoke to, but around the diversity of the type of care you could offer. Like, I wouldn't be in a position to offer long-term care, but I might be able to do short break care, and I didn't even know that was a possibility. So again, around expanding the definition of, it's not about you taking a child and they live with you for years and then there's quite a lot of different ways, aren't there? So, and the Mockingbird thing, they talked about that at that event as well. That sounded amazing.
I think one of the additions of the Mockingbird, it creates a real community of care where there's mutual support from different carers within that group. And I think, Jane, that for me at that event we were both at was very apparent in terms of how they very much were a community of carers that were supportive of each other.
Thank you.
Hey.
Yes, yeah.
The next part in the update gives an update in relation to the LGA, who were invited to Wokingham to do a peer diagnostic, and that involved 3 members from different councils. We had a director, we had a lead member, and they came and they observed our corporate parenting board, and they looked across the range of different activities and services around corporate parenting. Some of the focus we've been working on has been amending how the corporate parenting board works, as Prue mentioned earlier. There's a sort of detailed breakdown about how we're moving that to be more inclusive, to have more children in attendance and more children contributing to the corporate parenting meeting. And we've also recruited a sort of deputy chair to support Councillor Bray as the chair of that meeting. There's also a brief summary there in relation to our DCS takeover day. Emma, I don't know if you want to just give some information in relation to
that. So last Monday we had, I was joined by an 18-year-old care leaver who became the DCS for the day, and I was her assistant. We had a range of meetings throughout that day, including with various directors overseeing finance and housing. As a part of that day, she has given some feedback in terms of her own insights and learning about the day, which was really, for both of us, was really positive. So I got a huge amount out of the day and kind of seeing my role through her eyes and her observations about how interconnected all of the council departments have to be in order to make things happen, which she hadn't fully realised. She hadn't fully realised the difference between kind of political representation and decision making and officers. So that was really, and as a result, realised how important it is to vote in terms of kind of decision making. So is keen to pursue a role either in the local authority as an officer or perhaps thinking about becoming a politician. So a successful day, and part of this is looking at, towards the end of the year, increasing that offer more widely with other leaders to offer that as an opportunity, because I think both officers and the young person get a huge amount out of that day in terms of understanding how decisions get made. The type of factors. I think probably the most surprising thing was that even though I have director in my title, I can't just direct things to happen, which was kind of one of her first reflections of the day. So yeah, so it's good.
Hey.
Yeah, did you want to say anything? Did you hear it?
No, I think involving children is really quite important. And what came out at the corporate parenting board when we discussed this was the lady from the NHS whose name escaped me, begins with L. Yes, she has been involved with a lot of different local authorities, and we're the only one which hasn't got the children involved already and has done some time. So I think this is a big move forward for us, and we'll improve things. And I've got a meeting set up with the young person, Robert, who will be co-chairing the corporate parenting board. So I'm looking forward to that with a slightly nervous anticipation.
Sorry, I know it's corporate parenting board related, but that list of activities that we could go to, I think is really useful. And I wonder if we could extend the invitation to this group, because the more we experience and see, the more effective we can be here.
I think that's an excellent idea. One of the things I've had a discussion about yesterday with our comms team is pulling together an events calendar across sort of the different children's services teams, so not just related to corporate parenting, that I think it would may be helpful to share with Children's Overview and Scrutiny members in terms of being able to become more involved and and meet some of our children and families as well.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to mention that as well, because I find that calendar useful with the corporate parenting board, but it did strike me that actually the children's services is obviously wider than that, and there might be other things which could fit into it wider. I'm thinking things like where there's opportunities to attend youth council or those kind of things which would fit more broadly into the children's services. And if there was that sort of calendar, that would be helpful, because that was one of the things going on this Scrutiny chairs regional meeting, which where it was sharing good practice. I mean, some of those committees were actually saying how attending events, getting sort of involved, and actually that engagement with young people. And I think that could be something which, as a committee we can possibly do even more of. So I think that could be helpful if that is available. Is that something already in progress? Were you saying?
We've done it for the corporate parenting board. We need to pull it together. So under each director, they will have a plan in terms of those kind of events that are planned, and what we want to do is just bring it into kind of one place, and we can share that with members on the panel. For various reasons, it wouldn't be something that we would publish publicly, but just in terms of just safeguarding some of the identities of children and families who are attending those events. But there are some that are open much more widely, but for members, yes, we can share that.
Okay,
right, thank you.
Carry on, Chair?
Yeah, thank you.
So then Family First Partnership, there's a summary in relation to the Family First Partnership and what the aims of this are and the core principles, which is around early intervention, the family-centred approach, and multi-agency working. And these are significant, will lead to significant changes across the way that services are delivered and the way that services are received for families in the community and children in the community. And then there's a summary of the transformation work that's underway, which is, I would say, quite significant in relation to our work with partners and partnership and the Children and Young People's Partnership, and how we're looking at the family partnership and the authorities that are part of a pilot and the learning from those, and how we can learn from those to apply with our thinking in Wokingham in terms of how we respond to those changes. There's then a summary in relation to the Berkshire West Safeguarding Partnership and the priorities. There was a meeting today in Wokingham, chaired by Emma, looking at those priorities and then the leads of those, and they were talked through in detail about what the plans would sit under them. So I've listed what those priorities are as well. And then finally, there's a summary of the Solihull approach, which is a evidence-based program about parenting, and it's for workers across the partnership to access, and that has been commissioned across the footprint of Reading and West Berks and Wokingham, and that will be I'm not sure on the launch date of that, Hayley, in terms of when that will be available, but that will be launching across the footprint. And then it summarises the key benefits of that approach.
Yeah, so just in relation to Solihull, so last month we had approval across Berkshire West footprint to commission Solihull approach collectively across that geographical footprint. We're just in the process of mobilising that kind of rollout, and we think come autumn it will be something that we'll be able to launch. What effectively we're purchasing is access for the whole population to access a range of different online courses around different developmental stages, around parenting support, emotional well-being, And what's really good about the kind of programme is that it's all evidence-based. It's developed by CAMS teams in Solihull. It also is something that we'll be able to use with our families when we're looking at our family hub work or the reforms. It will be something that we can use quite proactively with our families rather than sending families away to look at something to do online. It can be quite interactive. The bolt-on that we've purchased in relation to Solihull is access to all professionals, so don't need to be Woking Borough Council, it can be our schools, voluntary sector, access to a range of courses that look at kind of trauma-informed approach, brain development of children, so there'll be those online courses will be available to everybody, so I think that's a really powerful offer that's coming across that Berkshire West footprint for our yes, Jane.
Sorry. Is this quite a new approach to look at other authorities? Because like I noticed that started in 1996. I didn't know if the date was wrong. Is it like quite a new? Is it quite that we're doing?
Yeah. So the Solihull approach was developed first in 1996 by a CAMS team in Solihull. So that not within the local authority but within health. And then what's happened over the kind of the last couple of decades is that they've developed that and expanded that approach because they've seen how successful that's been. So they've almost added to that kind of library of evidence-based interventions and support for families. So it's just expanded out. So the kind of the first was in 1996, but now in 2025 there's a real kind of expansion of what that means.
Okay, so we're not late to the game.
We're not late to the game. We are, and we're doing that in collaboration with our public health colleagues as well. So it's something that we're working across those three areas to bring into Wokingham.
It's been used to really good effect in terms of that universal offer for families. It covers from kind of pre-birth through to teens, and I think kind of building on some of the ethos of the reform work that we're trying to do is that at all points in our lives as parents we might need to draw upon support for various different reasons, and being able to have something that's accessible that you can use, and it will be so parents can access that. As Hayley was saying, there's a professional portal, so it's also raising the skill set and the knowledge base within our own workforce across the board, because I think that's also been acknowledged, that kind of the impact of COVID has really sort of fragmented. So having some shared understanding around sort of brain development and support for parents, and the ability to check out kind of is this within the normal range of development or not, and so having information, evidence informed again, and that's also got some good outcomes. So they've evaluated the programme. So part of the benefit of joining now is that we are joining a very well established evidence evaluated programme that will be able to also measure just in terms of kind of how it's being accessed. Is it kind of the uses of it as well?
Can we have a look at it? Like, can we see it just to see what's? Yeah.
We could arrange a demonstration.
We can. And I think it's just really important to add there that with the actual programme, you can have audio looped over the top of videos. It's available in 108 languages. So it's really the accessibility factors there as well, in terms of different demographics within the borough and different languages that are spoken. So I think it's quite dynamic in that way. So I think for us it's a really good investment. Yeah. And as Emma said, there is a there's a pre and a post measure, so you can measure the impact of the interventions and the online courses. So yeah, watch this space.
Thank you very much. So I think if there's no further questions on that, I think we'll move on that. But thank you very much for that, the comprehensive report with that. And I think one of the takeaways is to have a look at that calendar of events and things like that to build in and can share with the committee. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next item, which is item 13, which is the Spencer's Wood business case, which I believe is back to Ollie. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, apologies. It's been brought to my attention that I was frozen on screen for a portion of Adam's presentation, but there was an IT issue, so I've rebooted and hopefully that's fixed. The report in front of you, so it sets out kind of 5 options in relation to the delivery of additional capacity in the Shinfield area. Now, I think it's probably worth opening this with slightly kind of detailed explanation of kind of what all of these different tables mean, because I'm kind of cognizant that these may have caused some kind of confusion, because they on first reading they may be telling kind of different stories, but when you kind of see the picture in the round, actually they're kind of telling the same story from different angles. So the first thing to note really is that when we do school place planning in Wokingham at primary level, we undertake that planning for 7 different what we call primary planning areas. And the primary planning area in question for Shinfield is what we call the Southwest. Now, the Southwest includes 7 schools, as you'll see in Table 1. So those are all of the schools which we plan for collectively. Now, it's important to note that that collective planning is kind of, to a certain extent, enforced upon us by the annual SCAP return that we do to the DFE, because our planning has to be aligned with what the DFE kind of provides us funding on the basis of, and those planning areas are what we're required to provide the return in relation to. So the Southwest planning area, as I said, has those 7 schools within it, and this year, one of those schools had surplus places. So most of those schools were full, but one of those schools has surplus places. And that will inevitably get reflected in the forecasts for that area. So when you look at Table 2, you'll note that in 25-26 is the peak forecast year. So that's this year, the peak forecast year for demand in that overall area. And then there are surpluses projected for any years subsequent to that. Now, we fully anticipate that the vast majority of that surplus will more than likely be concentrated at that one school, which already has an existing surplus within the peak forecast year. And that kind of leads you into kind of the picture that's kind of set out within Table 3. So in Table 3, this is really the critical table to focus on when we're considering the current and likely future demand specifically in the Shinfield area. So that concentrates on the 4 schools of the 7 schools that are outlined in Table 1, specifically within the Shinfield area. And those schools, as you'll see this year, were all filled to their capacity, and indeed had surplus demand relative to that capacity. So you'll see there that the 2 key columns to kind of compare there are the PAN, which is the annual kind of cap on emissions in each of those schools in reception year, and the 4th column, which is the first preferences that were expressed for those schools. So you'll see there that when we compare those 2 figures, there is excess demand relative to supply of approximately 35 places at the moment. Let's bear in mind that this is the peak year worth of demand, so we'd expect that number to fall back slightly, which broadly speaking indicates the need for 1 FE, i.e. 30 places, worth of additional provision specifically in the Shinfield area. And that is what gets mapped onto the options that we outline within this report. Now, it's also worth bearing in mind in this context that the other 6 planning areas within Wokingham are all experiencing a substantial oversupply of places. So as the birth rate drops, and it has dropped and is continuing to drop within the forecast period, really kind of reaching the kind of nadir in the 27-28 emissions year, and then kind of bobbling around the bottom from there in a trough, which may tick up again or may drop again, but we're kind of experiencing kind of what we think is a trough. at this point in time within the latter stages of our forecast period. But what we're saying there effectively is that within our Wokingham as a whole, we anticipate that for those other 6 areas within Wokingham, they'll probably have to each have PAN reductions of between 1 and 2 forms of entry in each area, totaling as a whole 8 forms of entry worth of PAN reductions. So we need to balance the need to provide places specifically within Shinfield in this much bigger context where we're actually having to reduce numbers across the board. So what we absolutely can't do is get into a situation where we're over providing places within Shinfield, because we're just making a bad situation worse, not only in specifically in the Shinfield area, but as a function for the broader picture as well, because creating excess places in one area may just reflect in the excess places in that area, but in addition, another possible scenario is it draws pupils into that area from other areas and makes the issue worse in those areas. So there's a really fine balancing act, and on the basis of the existing data, like table 3 is your critical one, it's very clear that 1 FE is a demand that we'd seek to provide for, if indeed we were to seek to provide for additional demand in this area. And that's what we're reflecting in these options. So the key options we've set out in this report, now I will say they're just options at the moment, and indeed open to discussion if there are any other options that the Open Scrutiny Committee would like to kind of explore. But at the moment, the ones that we're looking at, first of all, do nothing, which obviously does nothing to address what we believe is evident need within the Shinfield area, but by the same token doesn't, on the plus side, doesn't cost us anything in capital terms, and also doesn't exacerbate the oversupply of places in the broad picture of primary places. Second option is to, I'll say let's treat options 2, 3, and 4 as being in some way related, because all of those involve building a new school building on the Spencer's Wood site at 1 FE. Now, the 3 ways of doing that, if you will, are options 2, 3, and 4. So the first option is to open an entirely new school within that building. That has the benefit of obviously providing those places and also diversifying provision in the area. It's through an established route in terms of the preschool presumption process, which we have established at a national level. The drawback of that is it creates additional places within the system where we, as I've said, we need to reduce places overall. So what that will do is those 35 places that would have been dispersed to other areas are located here, and that therefore places more pressures on neighbouring areas whereby we will have to either, options are reduce PANs in those areas, or in the worst case, close schools in those areas. So again, a really fine balancing act. The second option is to do this via, the third option, which is the second of the 3 options that I'm discussing at the moment, is to open a satellite school, whereby the idea would be to effectively open a school on a split site. So one of the existing schools in the area could have an off-site provision effectively, and deal with that as a school organisation process that they expanded an existing school. The drawbacks of that are very similar to the first option in terms of the fact that you get an oversupply of places. Obviously, there's a capital cost that comes with all of these options, all of these 3 options. In addition to which, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of appetite for that within the local school community. Broadly speaking, the schools that I've spoken to aren't particularly interested in split site provisions, so there would be a kind of market issue in pursuing that option. The fourth option is to relocate an existing school. Now, that has all of the benefits of options 2 and 3 in terms of providing for that localized need, in terms of the differential between supply and demand. But it has the additional benefit of actually moving an existing school from a location of oversupply of places to a location of undersupply of places. So it doesn't exacerbate that issue that the other 2 options do, and it potentially saves a school, that gives a lifeline to a school that would potentially otherwise be at risk of closure in one of those areas of kind of oversupplied places. So there are distinct advantages of that relocation option relative to options 2 and 3. Now, the fifth option is looking at enlarging an existing school within the Shinfield area on its existing site. That's an option, obviously, we are obviously kind of currently looking at as well. The advantages of that are pretty straightforwardly, that it would cost us less in capital terms to deliver an expansion than a wholly new school. Where there are disadvantages, obviously there are not. It has all of that, those issues around exacerbating the generalized oversupply of places. In addition to which, I think it's worth noting that if we were to go with, say, option 4, options 2 and 3 and 4 deliver an advantage specifically in terms of SEND places, because the design that we have developed for the proposal that was taken through to the planning committee last week includes within it a resource space. And indeed, like I've made a commitment that any new school provision that we deliver through any of the local plan update, for example, will include specialist provision as a core integral element of that. So speaking to the previous paper, right, that inclusion agenda. So that'll be an integral element of any new schools that we'll seek to deliver within Wokingham. So what an enlargement of an existing school wouldn't do would be to deliver you something like that. So it does nothing to kind of deliver all of those additional benefits that come with associated with additional specialist provision. In addition to which, if we were to relocate a school, for example, we're not freeing up a site by expanding a school here. So by freeing up a site, there are potential options that you could do with that site in the relocation option. One, you could sell it to recoup a capital receipt, which would to some way go to offsetting the capital expenditure of a new school. Another option, alluding to a conversation that we had on the previous paper, is you could potentially use a site such as that as an option for delivering additional specialist provision. So there are different options that can get brought into play through a relocation option, either of which would have kind of substantial benefits for the council. And hopefully those are kind of elaborated within the options appraisal that's out in option 5, in table 5, sorry. I think that kind of gives you the key highlights of the paper. I'm sure people will have questions, especially in relation to the numbers and how we get to 1FE. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. I think it's just worth reiterating as well for the committee and for anyone watching as well that the recommendations for this are not that this committee is making any kind of final decision on this, but suggesting either preferences within those options towards the executive, or equally, if there are any options which the committee would prefer to rule out or have lowest on the list, that we can also recommend that as well. Are there any? Would anyone have any? Yeah, Moses, do you want to start off?
I want to ask: is this options appraisal an academic exercise? Because the planning committee already gave approval for this primary school at Spencer's to go ahead on the 9th of June. So, because I understand there's a Section 106 agreement to build the school. So is this an academic exercise or?
Definitely not academic. I think it's, what I can be very clear about is the S106 capital that's allocated to this would not cover the full cost of delivering a new school. I mean, broadly speaking, it would be about half of the cost of delivering a new school. So there is definitely an exercise we need to go through to assess the cost benefit of all of the different options. So absolutely, we do need to factor in the difference between the S106 that's been received and how much the scheme would cost. In terms of the scheme that was brought to the planning panel, as I was hopefully made clear at the panel, it's a 1FE school, but it's been designed such that it could be expanded in future should the need kind of arise and should the need be evident. All of the communal spaces, for example, the dining facilities, have been designed in line with building bulletin recommendations for a larger school. So it can, by adding another wing on it in terms of classrooms, etc., it does have the flexibility to expand in future as well. So we've done our best to kind of keep the option that was taken to the planning panel as flexible as possible. But by the same token, there is also the option to kind of just not develop that scheme any further and to go with either do nothing or go with an expansion option of another school, both of which in all likelihood would be cheaper in capital terms for the council.
I think I would look at it the other way up, Moses, to the way you looked at it, that having that planning permission approved keeps all the options open, rather than if we hadn't managed to do that, then some of the options would get closed off, and that would not be helpful because, as you recognise, there's time constraints on Section 106 money.
Yeah.
What happens to the money if we don't proceed with the option?
If we don't proceed with the option as the Section 106 is currently written, if we do not proceed with a build on the Spencer's Wood site, then we would forfeit the S106 funding in terms of how the S106 condition is currently written.
I was going to ask just a little bit about, I think I've understood what option 4 means in practice, but it says basically blah, 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 localised competition from undersubscribed schools within the whole borough who wish to consider relocating their premises. Just thinking of my own area where I live, the undersubscribed school out of the 3 or 4 is the one that's considered probably the least attractive by parents for a variety of reasons. I'm not saying undersubscribed means underperforming, let me be very clear, but there are perceptions in the audience base of how these things are. Now, how would you propose to actually protect standards and make sure any relocation was delivered quality for the people who could potentially end up going there?
So assuming on the assumption we were to go with option 4, the proposal would be that we would have an expression of interest process. So that would go out to all schools, but one would expect that only those schools that were undersubscribed would be actually and at 1 FE would be interested in expressing an interest, but we'll open up to the entire school community. Now, as part of the assessment process in that, like one of the key criteria that we would look at would be the educational standards of that school. So obviously those schools with good Ofsted ratings, for example, would be placed at an advantage within the competitive process relative to those that were kind of rated kind of inadequate, for example. So that would definitely be a factor in the scoring mechanism for which we would use to kind of select the school that would be relocated if that option were to be pursued. Does that answer the question?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. I would like to bring in Catherine. I'm aware she's not on the committee, but as I understand, she's got a couple of points relating to her ward, and I think it'd be easier coming from her than me trying to relay what she's asked me.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Well, I follow on from Charles's question just then about relocating a school. It's not clear whether you'd relocate any of the children.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, it's purposefully vague on that point, and I'll explain why. Because it's hard to kind of make that determination without knowing which school you're going to go with. And certainly one of the considerations, again, within the scoring mechanism that we would open up in terms of option 4, if that were to be pursued, would be looking at the proximity of the existing site to the proposed site, and obviously kind of giving greater weight to those schools that were closer. Because obviously, if a school was very close, then it could be a reasonable expectation that you could kind of lift and shift the existing pupils to the new site. If it was very far away, then you'd have to kind of run with an option, I believe, whereby the schools on the existing, the pupils on the existing site would be able to kind of stay at the existing provision until such time as they transition to secondary, and then you grew the other one from the ground up. So you'd effectively running 2 sites for a period of time until such time as all the other pupils are kind of moved through from the old site. So yeah, it's deliberately vague, but that's because basically we would really need to determine that once we knew which school it was that was going to be relocated if that option were pursued?
I mean, there are a couple of points related to that. One is that I think outline planning permission was granted outline planning permission was granted before the DEPZ extended. But the assumption is that it's not bringing children into the area. Now we've granted planning permission, that it may be too late for them to object to that. So that may be an academic point, as someone used the phrase academic earlier. I just thought I'd throw that out there. And the other problem is that, of course, it's shifting the problem of Shinfield children and indeed Swallowfield children having to travel a long distance. You're just shifting some other children to travelling a long distance to Spencer's Wood. But, you know.
I don't know if Ming has his hand up. I don't want to come in on that point or another one, but I'll defer to Ming and then come back to that question if that's okay.
Yeah, just in response to Councillor earlier question about the detail. Once we have agreed to which option to choose one, I think at this stage, like I said, that I think what Olive explained to member is what normally will happen. But what we need to do is really to consult, to co-produce with stakeholder. We already set up a stakeholder group, which have school, community, and now we're here as well. So all the input from school leader, we already heard school leader talk about quality of education should be one of the criteria carry weight. So also about the other factor, community may want feedback. So what it's not about just about deliberately keep it vague. It's something I think at this stage we can only tell you what normally will happen. But I think if we enter that stage, choose which option, we will need to do more work to make sure we have a process and criteria set up that will reflect what being feedback from the community, from the stakeholder.
Can I continue?
I was going to answer your original questions, but if you want to answer.
Go on.
Yeah. So in terms of the first question around kind of bringing pupils into the area, the DEPZ, I think if the ONR's kind of assumption was that like a new school in the area would not bring kids into an area at any point in time, then they don't understand the admissions process, because broadly speaking, that can happen with any school, any popular school can bring pupils in from far and wide into an area. So if they permitted it in inverted commas on the assumption that this would only serve kids from within the Shinfield area, then I'm sorry, they just don't understand the admissions process. So I have to kind of would have to kind of disabuse them of that notion if I've got a chance to meet them. The second point around kind of shifting the issue of transport. Now, what I will say is, when we're looking at the forecast for the wider area, as is set out in that table in the report for the whole Wokingham area, what you'll see there is the numbers are reducing and reducing and reducing. So actually, what we expect to happen is if in those other areas, schools may well kind of reduce like substantially to having kind of very low pupil numbers and or close. So when you're left with a situation like that, actually kind of any pupils at these schools that may apply could very easily be redistributed within their local areas when that school kind of moves. So I don't think it would cause in the long term the need for pupils to travel very long distances. Certainly, if, for example, we were to, through that process, select a school that was actually on the other side of Wokingham, then we would only do that in a scenario whereby in which the numbers in that broader area were such that by losing that school, there would still be sufficient places within that area, such that pupils wouldn't need to travel in the long term. And also, as I said earlier, if it were to be a kind of big distance between those two sites, we wouldn't, I don't think, design the kind of the relocation such that we would expect pupils who are existing at that school to travel. We would run them as a split site provision for the duration of that kind of relocation process. So yeah, we'd certainly look to design the process such that it wasn't disadvantageous in terms of journey times for any pupils in the area from which the school was relocated.
Well, I made that point because I think it's very important not to be moving children a long way, and I think that there's a large number of children. Well, okay, school numbers are falling, but there is a number of children in Shinfield and Swallowfield, which you barely mentioned in your paper, who have to travel large distances to school, and it's not fair. They're disadvantaged by that, and you know that's the argument for building a school in Spencer's Wood, not extending a school in Shinfield, which I can't believe will cost less, because you'll lose the money from the developers if you'll lose the S106 money if you do that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So
and you'll have to probably buy more land from the university.
Sure,
I'm not sure about that, but I believe that you'll have to buy more land from the university. So I can't see that extending Aldergrove is going to cost any less than building the new school.
Okay. As things stand, there is a small cost differential between the two. I guess, you know, in terms of how the S106 is currently drafted, that's absolutely a correct assessment. I guess that there is always the potential to kind of enter into further negotiations with the developers, but on the basis of the current evidence, then yes, that's a correct assessment. But we're looking at kind of exploring all options in more detail and taking them forward. I guess what we would ask from you is to kind of look at the options without kind of specific figures in your mind about the cost of each of those options, just that broadly speaking, capital would be required for any of the options 2 to 5, and capital wouldn't be required for option 1, obviously, and to kind of weigh them up in that respect, and really to kind of look at the qualitative benefits in all of that context, and to kind of assess kind of what your preferences would be on that basis. And then when we have that kind of more detailed kind of understanding of the relative net costs of each option, then we can use the thinking that you provided with us with at this meeting to inform the cost benefit analysis that ultimately gets taken to executive for approval.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in Charles and then Moses.
Thank you. Sorry, just one more point that occurred to me from something you said a second ago. I can understand from looking at this paper why option 4 initially appears attractive. But if you've got a transition school, basically, where existing children are remaining there while the school is relocating, there are other benefits you get from education, basically, which are outside what goes on in the classroom. Remembering a situation with my own children when they were primary school age in a school that was very low on numbers, no sports teams, no school plays, no extra school trips, things like that, all the things that broaden a child's education. Now, I'm not saying I've got the answer to that, but I would just implore that you consider that and think about that while you're making these taking this a step further.
Sure. Talking an awful lot about option 4 now. But I guess that kind of relates to the earlier point when I said that absolutely proximity of the sites would be a factor that weighed into the expression of interest process and the assessment of that. And like I said, the proximity of the site will be a factor that would weigh in favour of choosing a particular school, because the possibility for a direct lift and shift becomes much more kind of attractive relative to if they were very far away. Obviously, we need to weigh that against many other factors, including the educational standards, as we discussed earlier. But absolutely, if we can find a kind of perfect mix of kind of, you know, a good or outstanding school that is also kind of close to the site, then that is interested in this, then absolutely that becomes a very attractive option because it addresses all of those issues in one, really, without having to kind of run those split site provisions.
Do you want to come in briefly, Emma, and then Moses?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair, thank you. I think fair to say that we have also been reflecting on learning from other areas who've been addressing similar challenges in terms of shifting populations, but also overall reductions in the numbers of pupils within primary setting. If we do nothing, we will see an overall degradation within our whole education system in terms of what we are able to afford to support, and that will creep across if we fail to address the falling roles, because our schools will go into deficit collectively, so there are some difficult decisions that we are going to have to face with our communities, and I think that we have got systems in place to make sure that we've got kind of key stakeholder, but doing nothing and recognising the impact maybe on individual schools and children and families, but there's also a role where we have to look at this as a whole system. Because this is about creating a financially sustainable system where the quality of education is preserved through what we can resource. And if we don't manage and start to tolerate larger surpluses starting to emerge, it impacts on the whole system. And the quality of education, and that's what has become evident in other areas of the country that haven't embraced this early enough.
One of them is the Isle of Wight, where they have had to close good schools because they're local authority schools and they're within their control, whereas the Multi-Academy Trust didn't wish to work with them in the same way that I hope so far more or less holding together our local trusts and things see this as an education system problem. But if we don't address it in the right way, we will end up with schools fighting to survive, fighting each other, and we just can't, it won't be good for anybody. There's lots more complicating factors in there. So Ollie hasn't even referred to parental preference and what role that might play in this. But I think what we're interested in is what you think of those options. I don't want to say what my personal preference is, but I would say that do nothing is not really on.
I'll bring in Moses and then Chris.
Yeah, I was going to echo what Emma Bruce said, because the table we have here looks very qualitative. It doesn't sort of give you an idea of which one is, in terms of financial sustainability, is a better option to provide a lead. I know we talk about home to school transport as cost to the council, but also if a child is traveling for long, it affects even their quality of education, ability to concentrate. So I'm struggling with this option because I can't see what looks to me like, what is the overarching objective? What are we trying to achieve here? Is it finance? Is it the welfare of the children in terms of cost?
I would say that the principal objective of this is to kind of execute our duty to provide sufficient pupil places, specifically within the Shinfield area. That's what's driving this at the core. And then it's looking about kind of, well, how would you do that in a way that kind of delivers the most sort of ancillary objectives as well? And obviously kind of homeschool transport is a factor within that. I think to address kind of Councillor Glover's point, you know, the new build option kind of is the best in that respect, because it creates a new site, and so it kind of provides you with some geographical diversity there. But there are other considerations as well, as I spoke to earlier. You know, the bringing up as a site under option 4 potentially frees up a site to kind of do a load of other stuff with. Then against all of this, you have to kind of consider the capital considerations. But in addition to which, any of the new build options, as I said, include SEND provision, which, as we alluded to in the previous presentation, well, if we're talking about, say, 21 kids, send kids to that provision, multiply that by £20,000 a year. It's a lot of money.
Thank you. I'd just like to briefly, bring in Chris. Did you have a point? Yeah.
Sorry, the question was about the parental preference, because as a parent, obviously, who sent children to school, my parental preference was to have my child in the best place. So, and you take that into account, don't you, when you're choosing schools? So if you choose to send your child further, that's a choice, isn't it? So, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, are we saying that parental preference is aiming for what is best for the child, and that's why that's important? Is that what we're saying?
I think one has to assume that that parents act in kind of as rational actors, and therefore will typically choose what they consider to be in the best interest of their child. So yeah, parental preference is the best metric that we have for what the family considers to be in the best interest of the child. And sometimes that will be dictated by kind of, which school has the best Ofsted rating. In other cases, it'll be kind of, which kind of form of education provision kind of suits the need of my child, which isn't necessarily just kind of a direct corollary of Ofsted ratings. In other situations, it'll be kind of, which is going to be best for inclusion, which is going to be best from their friendship network kind of perspective, which has got the best kind of sports facilities. There are so many different things that can play into parental preference, but that kind of, I guess, parental preference encapsulates that kind of rational actor model, whereby we have to assume that the parent knows best in terms of what is in the best interest of their child. And I think in terms of sort of encapsulating that all in terms of the options appraisal, by providing greater diversity of provision, which options 2, 3, and 4 provide, you enable a greater diversity of provision from which parents can choose, and therefore, by implication, augment the principle of parental preference.
Thank you. I'm very aware of time. I just want to, I'd like just a very brief comment from Moses, and then I'll very briefly bring in Catherine, but I'd like to try and just wrap this up in the next few minutes, because I know we've got a couple more items.
Just a quick question. What is this relocate school? What is it trying to achieve?
In terms of option 4?
You're relocating an existing school somewhere. What is it trying to achieve?
This is option 4 we're looking. Sorry.
Yes. Option 4.
Option 4, yeah. So what we're trying to achieve by that is all of the stuff in options 2 or 3, but in addition to which, kind of mitigating, well, wholly mitigating, and to some extent, kind of improving the situation that would be caused by creating new places within an education system that already has far too many primary places. So by creating additional primary places within Wokingham, you're basically kind of causing additional financial strain on the other schools where those pupils would otherwise have gone to. So by relocating a school, you don't increase the overall net of provision of places within Wokingham, which therefore doesn't create any additional financial strain on the system, and also relocates a school from an area of oversupply of places to an area of undersupply of places. So it meets the demand within Shinfield, whilst also helping us to reduce places in one of those other areas where there is a substantial oversupply of places, which we are going to have to do anyway. And I think to kind of touch on Emma's previous point, if we don't do it this way, the alternatives are kind of quite serious. In all reality, like that could by choosing options 2 or 3 over option 4, you may just well be leading to the closure of a school elsewhere in Wokingham, and all of the associated problems that go along with that in financial terms, in terms of displacement of pupils, in terms of kind of the impact on children's learning, and in terms of the impact on the staff of that school as well, redundancies, etc. So I think we all want to do whatever we can to avoid the potential for school closures, and option 4 does that to the best of the ability of this proposal. in a way that options 2 and 3 don't, and option 5 indeed.
Thank you. I'm going to very, very briefly bring Catherine in. I'm going to implore you to keep it brief.
Yeah. Okay, and I don't need answers. I just want to make a couple of points. One of the points is that I think we really need to see a list of candidate schools that could possibly be, that could possibly be moved, because they'd have to be only one form schools. And secondly, I mean, you know, you're just talking in a vacuum about possibly there are schools, but, you know, we really need to see what possibilities there are. Anyway, you don't have to answer it now.
I would like to kind of just touch on it in generalities. What I'm really keen to do is not to kind of start that public conversation before we have kind of given a clear indication that, for example, option 4 is the direction of the council, because I don't want to go down to a school. I don't want to go down to a school that kind of knows that they're given 2 or 3 years at risk of closure and offer them a lifeline that we're not serious about. I have a list of schools in my head that I think would be great candidates for this, but I don't want to start a public conversation around that, because it's just unfair on the pupils and staff of that school to do that at this stage, and until we have decided as a council that like option 4, for example, is the route we want to go down. It would be unfair to do otherwise.
I can understand that. Okay. We have to imagine it in our heads. We'll all have to look at the map of schools and see, you know, whether it's absolutely. I don't believe it's feasible, really. I just don't think it's going to happen. But anyway, the other point that I wanted to make was that I am ward councillor for Spencerswood and Swallowfield, and there are virtually no school places in Spencerswood and Swallowfield. There are 60 school places, right, in that ward.
Right.
Graiseley and Lambs Lane. And it's just a desert, basically. Some parents, okay, Chris is right, some parents want to go to send their children to the best school. A lot of parents want their children to go to a reasonably near school. And people are actually moving out of the area. And there are probably people who don't buy houses in the area as well, because of the lack of schools. But I mean, I know people personally who are literally moving because there aren't the schools. And Swallowfield is just not served at all by, you know, they all have to go a long way because they can't get into the Spencerswood schools that there are.
Sure.
Anyway,
so
you don't have
your
to
preference
answer,
would be for
just want
options 2, 3, or
make
4. Well, what I will say, just to address the earlier point, is I'm sorry that you don't believe that it is feasible, but like I will say, like I've done this before at a previous council. I've done this. I've managed this process of a school relocation to a new school building on a different site. So I have absolute confidence that we could do this if that was the option that we were tasked with.
Okay, I'd like to sort of just wrap this up a little bit. I know it's been quite a long discussion, and I think it does expose, you know, the wider issues that the school place planning has, which we've addressed with other things. I think in terms of recommendations, I think it'd be quite useful just to have a look through some of the options and just get the committee's view whether we see these as viable or not viable options, which we can take forward. I think on the basis of the discussion, we'll address number 1 first. The do nothing option. My personal view from the discussion that we've had is that this hasn't been given much positive thought, and that the do nothing and sort of ignore this in term would not be an option that the committee would want to. Is there any overwhelming support for the do nothing option? No. So I think we can recommend as a committee that the do nothing option is well, we'd prefer that not to be taken forward. I think from the discussions, options 2, 3, and 4 I think have been mentioned, which involve substantially the creation of a new school. I wonder whether in some ways could be considered. My concern is that actually some of the issues with satellite schools or relocating schools actually require a bit of extra further detail to actually unpick, which maybe we don't have all the information for at the moment for obvious reasons, and whether we consider these as a kind of possible options, but with need more detail to actually distinguish between 2, 3 and 4. Again, from the discussions I've had, it seems like one of these options looks like a likely one to support in terms of creating. Does anyone sort of have particular opposition to any of these? Yeah, Charles.
All I was going to say, I share the point Moses said earlier, it's pretty impossible to go further than what you've just said because we don't know the finances, we don't know what's practically possible, we don't know what's deliverable. So I don't think I'd feel more comfortable with, apart from saying with 2, 3 and 4 would be my preferences and then all to be investigated.
Okay. Does anyone have any other further views on that? Yeah. So I think 2, 3 and 4 are where there would be would look preferable in terms of actually, well, based on some of those points about the planning permission and S106, and the fifth option with expanding a school is slightly different. It does provide those places, but obviously there are those issues which were mentioned about the use of S106 and actually the geography of it. Are there views in particular support or disagreement with this one? So this one hasn't been mentioned quite as much, but I don't know if anyone's got views.
I just want to know why this is not in school, because that looks like more cost effective, depending on whether there is a capacity to extend the school.
So I believe with this one, I think there is the potential with this one. I think as the downsides, it potentially forfeits some of the S106 funding. Again, the financial implications of that one, I think from the discussion are unclear exactly whether it would.
The funding has to be done in the other 3 options as well. No?
No, there is a lump sum which developers have provided, which can be put towards options 2, 3 and 4, but couldn't really be put towards option 5. So we would forfeit quite a lot of money. And I think that is quite a big jump. The other issue is that the existing schools, as Catherine has just outlined, there aren't any in Spencerswood and Swallowfield to speak of. So if you expand an existing school, it will not be in that area. It will be somewhere slightly further away. I think that's, so probably, I mean, I'm not getting that everybody's saying absolutely not this, but it's probably less favourable from what you've discussed than the other 3. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's just worth mentioning that options 2, 3 and 4, whilst making use of the Section 106 monies, would require additional capital investment in order to provide. So that's that, just as an outline consideration, although, you know, we haven't got the details in this paper. That's something that is kind of being worked up in relation to understanding that, but just need to make that clear that the options 2, 3 and 4 would require additional monies on top of those Section 106 monies.
So I think from summary, if we're okay with it, I think 2, 3 and 4 are the preferred options that we would like to see explored further in some more detail. Option 5 being possibly sort of second best, and option 1 being a sort of we'd rather not at all costs, really.
Is option 5 an option? Or can we?
Option 5 was our second, or I think that was the impression I got from the discussion.
The impression I got was that if necessary and you couldn't do the others, then
yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you for that. I know it's quite complicated, and I know there's lots more details to be worked out with it, but I think it's useful, as I say, seeing that actually in context of the place planning strategy and all the other things we've discussed as well. I wonder as well if we could just add to it. I mean, I've received, I know, some correspondence from the Shinfield Parish, not all of which that I've been able to share, but I wonder if before it goes to the executive, is it September?
We Shinfield Parish Council have an education working group, and we have a meeting set up with them. I can't remember exactly when it is, but in the next couple of weeks, and we will discuss it with them along with the other things.
Excellent. If that can be consulted with. Thank you. Right, thank you very much, everyone. I'm aware. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the youth needs strategy. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, all. My name is Charlotte Seymour, and I'm a Strategic Project Officer for Children's Services. And you will have received the report which outlines the ways in which we consulted with our young people last autumn as part of developing Wokingham's youth offer. We have got an extensive analysis document which is just awaiting very final sign off, and then that can be shared with you. But for today, we have some slides that provide a bit of an overview about the ways in which we consulted, some of the feedback we had from young people, the 6 recommendations following this, and our next steps. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. So a bit of an overview about what the youth offer is for those who don't know. So each local authority has a duty to secure services and activities for young people aged 13 to 19 and up to 24 with SEND. And really the focus is on activities outside of school. So this can be sports activities, cultural, special interest clubs, volunteering and community opportunities. And this really was the main purpose of the survey, the event that we held, and the focus groups as well. And what we did was we fed the output of that into our youth offer needs analysis, which would therefore kind of inform our action plan and ultimately the youth offer itself. If you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So we carried out a youth future focus survey, which was hugely successful. We ran it from the 16th of September to the 6th of November last year. And as you can see on that bottom table, we had over 2,000 responses, which was just amazing. So this was young people who either reside within Wokingham or are educated in Wokingham. So this was targeted really at secondary age and above. And that chart on the right-hand side shows the different age groups. As you can see, the majority of respondents were either sort of 11, 12, 13 years old. And then as they went older, we did get less and less responses. We had 3 different versions of the survey, depending on the young person's needs and availability. So we had the full survey, which was quite large. It was 30 questions, plus some questions about their kind of demographics. We then had a short version, which was just 4 questions, and then an easy read version as well. And you can see how that was broken down as well. Sarah, next one, please. Thank you. So just a couple of slides on some of the more pertinent questions that we asked. So one of these was looking at how happy young people are with different aspects of their life. Life at school, friendships, their experiences online, their health, community identity. But by and large, you can see that young people, are very happy. So the dark blue at the bottom, that's extremely happy. The orange showing they're very happy. So mostly positive. My life at school was the only one that kind of received a bit more of the less positive aspect. So 13% of young people were either not at all happy or not so happy with their life at school. And with each of the questions, we really delved into the analysis. We looked at gender, where they lived, and what schools they attend as well. But this is just a bit of an overview for you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So another one that we're particularly interested in terms of the youth offer is how would you rate the following for young people where you live? And we gave a whole range of different things. So green spaces, cost of activities, that was particularly something that came up quite a lot. One of the golden threads kind of throughout our survey and event. Information about things to do. how they rated that, volunteering opportunities, art and culture, etc. And from this, it did raise quite a few questions. Again, we have delved deeper into this in the full analysis and looked at more area and geographical based analysis for this. But we looked at, are there enough places for young people to go to so they have an interest, say, in art and culture? We were able to see, where they're located because they gave the first part of their postcode. So do we have enough for them to attend to? Cost of activities and other barriers, transport, for example, we looked at transport links. Information needs to be improved about activities for young people. Again, another golden thread that kind of came out was young people are really keen to be interested in active and involved in different opportunities, but they don't know what's out there. They don't know how to access it. And like I said, public transport again. Next slide, please. So as well as the survey, which we will go into a little bit more detail in just a moment, we held an in-person event, which was really lovely. It was held at the youth centre in November, and we had 6 schools join us that brought 54 students. You can see the list of schools that came as well. And we had Addington join us, which was lovely, and we had Home Grange, which was one of our independents. And like the survey, we focused on 6 topics. So we looked at safety in the borough, mental health and wellbeing, leisure and things to do, thoughts and ideas, volunteering, and support to be independent. And it was such a lovely event. Emma and Councillor Bray were there as well, and the young people got really involved. We've got some photos here, and we had stalls around the edge. We had 6 stalls, each one for those 6 areas, and then they kind of rotated, giving their thoughts, their ideas, their concerns. And we actually had some stalls in the middle, which were more kind of information stalls. So we had a variety there around health. We had places in leisure there, ARC, counselling. And yeah, it was such a lovely event. And head teachers are still saying how young people are continuing to talk about how much they enjoyed the event. So yeah, really great experience. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just do a very quick overview of each of those 6 areas. We'll then look at the recommendations and next steps. So in terms of safety in the borough, so young people who live in Wokingham feel safe in the area that they live. So you can see that on that map on the right-hand side. So that shows the dark green are those who felt extremely safe, and the lighter green is those who just felt very safe. Which is brilliant. If they hadn't felt safe, that would have shown up in red or in orange. So that's showing they feel safe in the area they live. However, what they did say was that they felt less safe using public transport and then also moving around the borough, so walking, cycling, scooting. And we drilled down into kind of genders for that as well. And it was young females who felt that they were less safe using public transport, whereas young males, they felt safe using public transport, but where they didn't feel safe was using a bike and scooting around in the borough. We asked young people what they would want to feel safer. So they said increased policing, better street lighting, more CCTV, and better support networks. And then just a few little stats in here. So 48% of young people felt that bullying, including online, was an issue in the area that they live. And 48% people also felt that violent behaviour was an issue in the area they live. Again, we have drilled down in the full analysis document. We've got that place-based data. The majority of young people felt that carrying a weapon wasn't a big issue in the area that wasn't a big issue. However, 32% of young people felt that this was a problem in the way in the area that they live. And then that table just at the bottom, and we asked young people which of the following have they or someone they know been personally affected by recently. Now, positively, Over half, so 54%, had said they hadn't been affected by any of these serious issues. However, particular note, we had just almost 500 people say that they'd been affected by bullying, including online, and also seeing hateful comments online. Again, we've got the data to drill down, particularly, where we've got 80 young people saying that they've been affected by carrying a weapon. So some very serious, data in here, but it's very useful for us to have. And just that last bit, the pie chart in the middle, do you know how to keep yourself safe online? The vast majority said yes, 7% said partially, but there was 14, I think it was, young people who said no. So again, this is going to be going back to, making sure that we've got adequate information on how to keep yourself safe online. So if you go to the next slide, please, and I will hand over to Sarah.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Charlotte. So our summary for leisure and things to do. So in this, we kind of got some results from the survey as well as our focus groups as well. So we were speaking to our young people around what would your ideal space for young people look like, and that's what we've got in this word cloud here. So somewhere safe is very important to our young people, comfortable, fun, friendly, and then we've just got kind of a summary here. When we were talking to the young people, they said they'd like a place that's safe with a trusted adult present, not someone who's particularly going to try and lead or like get you involved in activities, but just someone there who you can go to if something is wrong, or if you're feeling a little bit down, someone to talk to as well. They'd also like places with a variety of activities going on, so they can go and take part in stuff, or if they want to, they can just kind of chill out in the space, do their homework, something like that. They also want somewhere warm as well. And so we also spoke to our young people around things to do in the borough. What are the kind of the barriers at the moment stopping you from accessing these things? So at the top here, we've got the main two, which are transport. So lots of young people said that the buses, there are basically not enough buses for them to get to and from places. Sometimes young people said that the bus routes were too long, so often they were having to go into Reading or into Woking and back out to where they wanted to go, meaning, travel time was maybe an hour plus. And then in some cases, the buses were already full when they tried to get on. And then we've also got cost as a barrier as well. So this is obviously a big one that we've touched upon already, but particularly young people mentioned if they want to attend groups or clubs, gym memberships, and also leisure centres, that they were just too expensive for the young people to use. We then kind of spoke a little bit around transport, and then we found that 620 young people said that getting a lift from a parent, friend, or a carer was the only way that they could get somewhere if it was out of walking distance. We're not really sure if that is kind of because of where they live, or if this is because kind of like a parental influence. Maybe they think that their child would be safe if they gave them a lift to and from places. And then a common thread that's linking all through all of these is basically there's also not very good information available about what there is to do in the area as well. So a summary slide for volunteering. So this was good to speak to our young people about at the focus events. We were kind of speaking around what motivations were there for young people to volunteer. They said Duke of Edinburgh, it feels good for them to kind of help and contribute to something, and that it's rewarding as well. It helps build closer ties to the community. It's also good for kind of CV building and job experience or UCAS applications, and something that would help them volunteer now is if basically their friends could volunteer too, because I think sometimes young people are quite anxious, so having someone with them to kind of make it feel a little bit less stressful would be positive for them. And then so again, kind of talking around barriers, so travel again is one that came up. Age restrictions, so when we did a bit of mapping, we were kind of looking at the volunteering opportunities in the area for young people, and we just found that there weren't very many for those who were aged under 18 basically. Sometimes you have to have a DBS if you're going to be volunteering at places, and then other times it wasn't very clear as to why under 18s couldn't volunteer. Some of our young people said that they didn't really have any spare time to volunteer, which is obviously a very, very valid reason. But those who did want to volunteer said that it wasn't very easy to find volunteering opportunities, and there was little to no information about opportunities for young people as well. And when we spoke to them about how best would it be to get the information out, they said posters or a young person section on a website, and also charities coming into schools to kind of promote the ideas to the young people. Then we kind of touched briefly upon adults' perception of young people. So why do you think adults might not want young people to volunteer? They said that most places want qualified adults. They think that maybe young people cause hassle. It doesn't look professional if you've got a young person working there as opposed to an adult. They think potentially sometimes adults judge young people and potentially they don't trust them as well. So mental health and well-being. So we've got some stats here from our survey. So we asked the young people what they thought the most important concerns facing young people were at the moment. So the top here was school, education and exams, followed by mental health and well-being, friendships and relationships, body image and bullying. And I think, again, when we drilled down, friendships and relationships and body image were mainly females who were selecting that as one of their options. So we also spoke to our young people around support networks as well. We asked the young people, who would you turn to if there was something wrong, if you need to talk to someone, and 96.8% of our young people said that they did have someone to talk to, which is very good. And 86.2% said that that would either be a parent, carer, as well as other options as well. We said they could tick as many as they wanted to. And when we looked at it, it was 3.2% who felt that they didn't have anyone to speak to as well. So then when we also at the in-person event, we kind of spoke to the young people around existing support networks and how aware they were of them. And I think the consensus was basically they weren't really sure about the services that were available to them outside school to support their mental health. They mentioned that an anonymous service would be very well taken up if that was on offer. And they also felt that some schools only gave support to those with additional needs or someone who had a, I guess, diagnosed mental health issue. And they said that in school they would like a safe space or a safe person to talk to when they feel down as well. And then we've got our support to be independent here. So we asked the young people, what skills do you want to learn before you become independent? So we've got a bit of a word cloud here. So time management was a big one, budgeting, finance, coping with stress and mental health, healthy relationships. And then on the survey, we kind of broke it down a little bit into some areas. So financial, young people want to learn about budgeting, saving for mortgages, understanding mortgages and how they work, understanding taxes as well. Then we've got a domestic category, so around cooking and home living. Again, healthy relationships coming up here, how to deal with mental health and well-being as well if it's kind of a lower level issue, and also learning around basic car maintenance. And then we've got about career and future employment. So young people want to know a bit more around career options and pathways, further education options, work experience, getting your first job, what that kind of entails, what you have to do, learning a bit more around applications and interviews, kind of some preparation for that, SEND support as well for some young people, and also kind of how to write a CV. And then we've got being safe and making the right choices. So some more on education, young people, how to stay safe, especially online. I think a lot online scams was kind of quite at the forefront for lots of young people. How to stay safe in a relationship, and also how to use public transport safely. And some young people as well saying that first aid, they would like to learn how to, you know, give first aid, be a very useful skill, as well as how to travel independently, and also around drug and alcohol use, I think potentially safe use. And then we also did some extra focus groups as well as the main event. And so we went out to the SEND Youth Forum as well, and some of the kind of unique answers that they gave to this question around what skills they like to learn before becoming independent. They said increase self-esteem, dealing with anger, entering the workplace, which is similar to obviously the mainstream survey we did, but I think obviously they would need more specialised support for this. They said sometimes as well they think workplaces aren't always prepared to have someone with additional needs work for them. And something else they would want to learn as well is how to apply for benefits or PIP as well. So then we've got a thoughts and ideas slide. So this is we had a thoughts and ideas stall, I guess, at the event that we did. This was just kind of anything else that the young people wanted to mention or reiterate to us, I guess. So we asked them, what do you want to see more of? And they said around things to do, they want more skate parks, places for teenagers to hang out, parks, activities for young people, youth clubs, sport facilities, cheaper or free activities, safe spaces for them, spaces to do their homework, and cafes and parks. And then we've kind of got a little other section here. So they also said more road crossings or better road crossings around school, coordination of roadworks, which again, definitely they've heard this from their parents in the car, maybe on the way to school. We always hear something like that if we consult young people. Children represented in council meetings as well, which is obviously an interesting one to bring to this for tonight. And then also just better information sharing in general. So again, our young people are saying they want more information on mental health services, safeguarding, clubs and activities available to them, volunteering, further education and future careers and jobs. And again, when asking young people how they want to hear this information, through school was very popular. So in assemblies, on posters or flyers, community notice boards, at council, student rep meetings. Again, the young person section on the volunteering website, social media, and even through an app potentially. So now we've got our recommendations and actions, and this is after doing the survey and also doing our needs assessment as well. So around information sharing, we're calling this our youth digital offer. So lots of young people saying they want more information around lots of things. They don't know what's on offer to them. So we're working with the WBC digital team at the moment as part of a wider piece of work to improve the digital offer to children, young people and families. And we're actually going to Youth Council next week as well to consult with them around a few things around how our website looks at the moment, what can be improved, stuff like that, which is very positive. So around leisure and things to do. So young people requested that libraries remain open later at study spaces, and that's obviously already being piloted as well at Woking Libraries. That's really good to hear. Then we're working with our partners, including the voluntary sector, town and parish councils as well, to identify opportunities for youth activities, building upon that in each area, each ward, I guess. We're also linking in as well with the short breaks review, which includes working with providers to support them to be more inclusive and accessible to children with SEND as well. And then with support to be independent, we're currently mapping out what schools and voluntary sector kind of offer young people in terms of the support that they want. So those kind of 6 sections mentioned before. We're then sharing the findings with the current youth provision, so guides and scouts and youth clubs in the area, to let them know that this is the stuff that young people want to know before they become independent. Is there a way that you could work that into your group sessions, seeing as the young people are already there? We'll also then share the information back with schools and encourage them to include these areas within their PSHE lessons as well. Okay, so moving on to our recommendations for volunteering here. So working with the volunteer centre in Woking, so they said that they're trying to create a specific young person section on their website as well, to include opportunities for under 18s, just to make it very easy for those who want to access them. We're working to encourage local organisations and charities to offer volunteering opportunities for under 18s, also recommending that organisations and charities assist in the travel of the young volunteers, seeing as that's quite a bit of a barrier for some young people who do want to take part. We're also recommending that organisations promote the volunteering opportunities by going into school. As the young people said, they're more inclined to listen to someone like an outsider coming into school rather than their teacher or head teacher. We're also saying to charities as well, it would be good if you could promote the opportunities to the young people by saying these are the skills that you'll learn through volunteering with us as well. So around safety and security now, so we're working with partners within the council to help address the road safety suggestions that have come from the young people around better crossings in front of schools, the traffic calming measures near schools, educating road users as well, and increasing the number of bike lanes. We'll also be sharing the survey findings and analysis with the police for their consideration as well around kind of the request for higher police presence in the area. And lastly, around mental health and wellbeing, so we've got the data analysis that's been shared with the commissioning team as well to support the service improvements, and just trying to emphasise as well that anonymous services are being requested as well. And we're also working with relevant stakeholders as well to improve the information channels to ensure that young people know about the services and activities that are available out there already to support them. And just lastly, just running over our brief timeline, basically. So obviously we're kind of June now, so we're just finalising our youth offer action plan. Basically, we've set up subgroups to meet with each of the areas to try and tackle what the young people have said, trying to get down some granular kind of actions that we can put into place, basically. Also finalising our youth offer needs assessment as well, and hopefully getting both of those signed off July time. And we'll also be sharing back with the young people you said we're doing, basically to say this is all the stuff you've told us, this is the actions, these are the actions that we're putting into place to try and address what you've said. So yes, thank you. Let me go back off and we're happy to take any questions from anyone.
Thank you very much. That looks like a huge piece of work which has been undertaken, and I know lots of responses to sort of collate and deal with. So thank you for that and for summarising those. Jane, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, an amazing piece of work. It looks really impressive and a great response rate. The sharing with schools, have you shared all the data with schools? Because those bullying numbers are high, aren't they? Have the schools been made aware of that?
So what we did is for each school that had young people who responded, they received their own data. So it was all anonymised. So we couldn't identify the young people, but each school received their own data set to go away and do their own analysis. So they'll be able to see that. But schools didn't receive each other's. They all had their own raw data, and then all of the 6 who came to the event had an event summary as well. Which will be made available to everyone. It's on as a kind of appendices to the full analysis document.
Okay, and the other thing is I've been working with St Crispin's around volunteering, and hopefully Working and Voluntary Centre are aware of this, but Bracknell has an amazing portal for under 18 opportunities that they can probably steal with pride. Plenty of examples.
Yes, definitely. No, we're working very closely with Woking Volunteer Centre, and she is. They are underway in making an under 18 kind of section because, as Sarah said, it's not very clear at the moment on the website. But yeah, we'll certainly be using Bracknell as a bit of a template.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, that was a really comprehensive report, but I saw that the self-harm was really quite high as well. So are you working with CAMS as well to support schools and young people around that? Because it's a really difficult subject for a lot of them.
Of course. Well, we will be providing as soon as that kind of analysis document has been signed off. It's a huge document, it's 60 pages. Then we will be providing that not only to kind of the rest of the schools, but also to our partners as well. And we'll be working with certain partners where we'll be able to provide more of the granular data for them to kind of go away and digest as well. But yes, CAMS will be one of them.
Just to add to that, we in commissioning we work closely with CAMS, BHFT, and the ICB around that emotional wellbeing piece, and that has been picked up as part of that, as part of our kind of BAU as well.
Thank you. I was just going to a couple of very brief comments. I think it's great that you've mentioned engaging with other levels in terms of towns and parishes as well, because I know there's actually lots of the youth facilities and things are delivered on that level as well, which I think is great to see as well. Just very quick question about you mentioned the findings being shared with young people who had taken part in the survey. I was wondering actually whether it's almost possible to share it with everyone in the same way that it was shared with schools initially, because I'm a teacher myself. I remember seeing the survey come out and sharing that with students, but even if that can be, as I say, shared with everyone, because it might encourage a greater uptake next time you look at it, if they can see, because I think one of the perceptions with young people is, well, sometimes I do this or whatever, and what comes from it. And I think actually what you presented shows that there is a lot of things going on as a result of what they've said. And actually, even the ones who haven't taken part in it, if they see that this action is happening when they do complete a survey, it might encourage even greater uptake next time. And I think, I'm sure there's ways you've got sharing, but I think even just a summary, short PowerPoint that teachers can share, or even a short video or something, is really, really easy to share in schools. And I think students and schools themselves, I think, would appreciate that as well.
No, certainly. Well, firstly, thank you very much for sharing it with your students, because we wouldn't have gotten anywhere near that amount of responses if it wasn't for the support of the schools and allowing some students to do it during school time. So thank you very much for that. And yes, certainly we are going to be pushing this analysis and our findings far and wide, and that's part of what it's going to be when we do our You Said We're Doing. It's not just going to go to the schools and young people who are involved. It will be going everywhere because there's an awful lot of work, not just that we've shared, that has come out of this as well. So yeah, we're very keen for everybody to be seeing it.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think that was a really clear presentation, and thank you very much for presenting it. And sorry it was quite late.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so We'll just move on to the next point. So I am aware of the time. So the next item is the action tracker. I do think actually, is it forward program next? Sorry, forward program next. Are there any comments on the forward program for the next couple of meetings? Nope. So the next item is the action tracker. I think actually a few of these points have been covered in the meeting in terms of relation on ongoing things. I know the KPIs and the dashboard, I think we've already mentioned those and actually how those can work into future reports. So we can see those next time. And I know it's mentioned about the children care dashboard going on next time. That will be circulated, I think, as well. Does anyone have any comments about any of the actions they would like? No, thank you. Right, so we move on to Part 2, so that's under Section 100A, Part 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3